Hi everyone, welcome to Regularverse. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to walk you through the entire story of Regular Show, from the very first episode all the way to the very last. And I mean the whole thing. Every character, every arc, every twist, and every heartbreak that made this show one of the greatest cartoons Cartoon Network ever produced. Regular Show ran for 8 seasons and 244 episodes between 2010 and 2017, and across that time it went from being a silly show about two guys slacking off at work to a full-blown space opera about the fate of the entire universe. And the craziest part is that it all made sense. Every piece connected, every character grew, and by the end, a show that started with a magical keyboard somehow made you cry over a lollipop man sacrificing himself to save all of existence. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you the entire story of Regular Show. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. The Power. How two slackers started it all. To understand Regular Show, you have to understand the guy who made it. His name is J.G. Quintel, and before he ever pitched a show to Cartoon Network, he was just a college student at the California Institute of the Arts, which most people just call Cal Arts. This is the same school that has produced some of the biggest names in animation history. And while Quintel was there, he made 2 short films that would end up changing everything. The first one was called The Naive Man from Lollyland, and he made it in 2005. It told the story of a foreign ambassador who visits the United States, only to find out that his customs are not welcome there. The character in this short was a pale, lollipop-shaped man with a big round head and a gentle personality. If that sounds familiar, it should, because this character would eventually become Pops. The short even won recognition at the Nicktoons Film Festival that year and got broadcast on Nicktoons Network, which was a huge deal for a student film. The second short came in 2006, and it was called 2 in the AM/PM. This one followed 2 slackers working a late-night shift at a convenience store on Halloween. Things go wrong when candy filled with some kind of substance causes all sorts of chaos. During one of the wild moments in the short, one of the cashiers transforms into a gumball machine. That gumball machine character was voiced by Sam Marin, the same guy who would later voice the final version of the character. And that gumball machine would eventually become Benson. The 2 slackers in the short also served as early versions of what would become Mordecai and Rigby. So right there, in 2 college projects, Quintel had already created the building blocks for 3 of his most important characters. After finishing school, Quintel went on to work as a writer and staff director on 2 other Cartoon Network shows, Camp Lazlo and The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. But while he was doing that, an opportunity came along that would change his career forever. Cartoon Network launched a project called the Cartoonstitute. The idea behind it was simple. They wanted to give creators the freedom to make short pilots without any interference from network executives or focus testing. Just pure creative freedom to see what people could come up with. Quintel jumped at the chance. He went back to the characters from his 2 student films, combined them with some newer characters he had been developing, and put together a pilot. He wanted to present his idea visually, rather than just talking about it, because he believed the concept would not make much sense if he just described it with words. So he storyboarded the whole thing. Craig McCracken, the creator of the Powerpuff Girls, and Rob Renzetti both saw his presentation and liked what they saw. Regular Show became one of only 2 shows from the entire Cartoonstitute project that got picked up for a full series. The other one was Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, which later led to the creation of Uncle Grandpa. And with that, Regular Show was officially born. The show premiered on Cartoon Network on September 6, 2010. And from the very first episode, it was clear that this was going to be something different. That first episode was called The Power, and it set the tone for everything that would follow. The story starts simple enough. Mordecai, a 6-foot-tall blue jay, and his best friend Rigby, a much shorter brown raccoon, are hanging out in their shared bedroom in the park house. They are both 23 years old, and they work as groundskeepers at a local park. And by work, I mean they try their absolute hardest to avoid doing any actual work. On this particular day, they have a problem. There is a giant hole in their bedroom wall that they need to fix before their boss finds out about it. And their boss is Benson, a living gumball machine with a very short temper and a habit of threatening to fire them on a daily basis. So what do Mordecai and Rigby do? Do they call someone to fix the wall? Do they try to patch it up themselves? No. They find a magical keyboard that has the power to make anything happen. Whatever you play on it, whatever you say while playing it, it becomes real. They call it the Power. And instead of using it responsibly, they use it to try and get a raise from Benson so they can pay someone else to fix the hole. Things obviously spiral out of control, as they always do on this show, and the episode ends with Mordecai and Rigby launching their friend into space by accident before eventually getting everything sorted out. And that right there is the formula that would carry Regular Show for its entire run. It always starts with something small and ordinary, setting up chairs, returning a videotape, buying concert tickets. But then, through some combination of laziness, bad decisions, and supernatural forces, things escalate to an absolutely insane degree. An argument over a couch leads to a reality-bending game of rock, paper, scissors. Trying to stay awake for concert tickets leads to a deal with a shady coffee businessman. A simple birthday party turns into a battle with an arcade machine that nearly destroys the world. The mundane always becomes extraordinary, and that contrast is what made the show so special. But the characters are what really held everything together, and the power introduced all of them right away. Mordecai was voiced by Quintel himself, and the character was based on Quintel during his own college years. He once described the character by saying that Mordecai represents that time in your life when you are hanging out with your friends and getting into stupid situations, but you are also trying to take things seriously enough to build a future. Mordecai is the more responsible of the two main characters, but that is a very low bar when your best friend is Rigby. He has genuine ambitions. He wants to be seen as mature. He wants to do the right thing, but he is constantly pulled into chaos by Rigby and by his own inability to say no to a good time. Rigby, on the other hand, was voiced by William Salyers. Quintel came up with the character after randomly drawing a raccoon hula hooping. He liked the design so much that he built a whole personality around it. And that personality was basically the opposite of Mordecai. Rigby is short, loud, impulsive, and completely allergic to responsibility. He does not think about consequences. He does not care about rules. And he is terrible at almost everything physical, to the point where even Pops, the gentlest character on the show, can beat him at punchies. But underneath all of that, Rigby is fiercely loyal to his friends, even if he has a terrible way of showing it most of the time. Then there is Benson, their boss and the park manager, a gumball machine who turns red when he gets angry, which is constantly. Benson spends most of his time yelling at Mordecai and Rigby for slacking off, and his catchphrase of threatening to fire them became one of the most iconic running gags on the show. But even from the beginning, you could tell there was more to Benson than just anger. He was a guy who desperately wanted things to run smoothly, who took pride in his job, and who deep down actually cared about the people who worked for him, even if they drove him completely insane. Pops is the son of Mr. Mellard, the man who actually owns the park. But Pops is nothing like a typical rich kid. He is a tall, thin, pale pink man with a giant lollipop-shaped head, a white handlebar mustache, and the personality of a child who has never seen anything bad happen in the world. He finds joy in absolutely everything. Butterflies, jokes, even the simplest tasks fill him with wonder. He speaks in a formal, old-fashioned way and is genuinely kind to everyone he meets. In the early seasons, Pops mostly served as comic relief, the sweet, innocent guy who did not quite understand what was going on around him. But as we will see later, there was a reason for all of that innocence, and when the show finally revealed it, everything about Pops took on a completely different meaning. Skips is an immortal Yeti who works as a groundskeeper alongside everyone else. Voiced by Mark Hamill. Yes, the Luke Skywalker Mark Hamill. Skips is the most capable person at the park by a wide margin. Whenever Mordecai and Rigby create some kind of supernatural disaster, which happens almost every episode, Skips is the one who knows how to fix it. He has been alive for centuries, he has seen everything, and he always moves by skipping instead of walking. The show would eventually explain why he skips and how he became immortal. And that explanation turned out to be one of the most heartbreaking stories in the entire series. But in these early episodes, Skips is simply the reliable guy, the one everyone turns to when things go wrong. And finally, there are Muscleman and High Five Ghost. Muscleman is a stocky, green-skinned guy whose real name is Mitch Sorenstein. He is loud, crude, and obsessed with pulling pranks and making terrible jokes, especially his signature "my mom" jokes, which are basically failed attempts at "your mom" jokes. High Five Ghost is his best friend, a small ghost with a hand sticking out of the top of his head, which he uses to give high fives. In the early seasons, these two mostly served as rivals to Mordecai and Rigby, annoying them with pranks and getting in their way. But just like everyone else on this show, they would grow into much deeper characters as time went on. All 7 of these characters were voiced together in group recording sessions rather than individually, which was unusual for cartoons at the time. Quintel specifically chose this approach because he wanted the dialogue to sound natural and conversational, like real people actually talking to each other rather than performing. He wanted the show to be easy to listen to, even for adults, and that decision gave regular show a laid-back energy that most other cartoons just did not have. Each episode took about 9 months to make. Quintel and his 35-member team would develop the script, create rough hand-drawn storyboards, animate them into an animatic, get network approval, and then send the assets to Serum Animation in South Korea for the actual animation. The finished product would come back to California, where music composer Mark Mothersbaugh, known for his work with the band Devo, would create the soundtrack. The show also used licensed music in a way that most Cartoon Network shows never did. pulling in real songs from the 80s and 90s to give it that nostalgic feeling that became such a huge part of its identity. When Regular Show first aired, it was a ratings hit. The first 2 seasons ranked #1 in their time slot among the target audience, and the show averaged about 2 to 2.5 million viewers each week. Critics praised it for its appeal across different age groups, its simple but effective animation style, and its constant references to 80s pop culture. It would go on to receive 4 Primetime Emmy Award nominations, including a win in the short-format animation category for the Season 3 episode, Excellent. But in those early days, Regular Show was still figuring out what it wanted to be. Seasons 1 and 2 were almost entirely standalone episodes, with no real connection between them. There were no major story arcs, no ongoing character development, and no deeper mythology. It was just Mordecai and Rigby getting into wild situations week after week, and honestly, that was enough. The writing was sharp, the humor landed perfectly, and every episode delivered that satisfying escalation from normal to completely insane. But the show was about to change. Starting in Season 3, Regular Show began planting the seeds for something much bigger, giving its characters real backstories, real relationships, and real consequences for their actions. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And that shift started with a simple coffee shop, a waitress named Margaret, and a blue jay who had absolutely no idea how to talk to the girl he liked. Section 2. Just set up the chairs. The park, the rules, and the chaos of Seasons 1 and 2. Now that we know how Regular Show came to be and who all the main players are, let's actually talk about what made the early seasons so fun to watch. Because before this show became a space adventure about saving the universe, before there were love triangles and spy twists and lollipop gods, Regular Show was just a show about 2 guys who could not be bothered to do their jobs. And somehow, that was more than enough. Seasons 1 and 2 of Regular Show are pure chaos in the best possible way. There is no ongoing storyline. There are no big arcs connecting one episode to the next. Every episode is its own self-contained little adventure, and the setup is almost always the same. Mordecai and Rigby are given a task, or they want something, or they get bored, and then things go completely off the rails in ways that nobody could have predicted. The beauty of these early seasons is in that formula. You tune in every week knowing that something ordinary is about to become something absolutely insane, and the show never lets you down. The second episode of the entire series, Just Set Up the Chairs, is maybe the single best example of what Regular Show was all about in those early days. The plot is incredibly simple. There is a birthday party happening at the park, and every employee gets an interesting job to do. Everyone except Mordecai and Rigby, who are only trusted with the boring task of setting up the chairs. That is it. That is the whole assignment. Just set up the chairs. Benson is basically testing them to see if they can handle even the most basic responsibility without messing it up. And of course, they cannot. Instead of just setting up the chairs, Mordecai and Rigby get distracted by an old arcade game they find in a storage room. They start playing it, completely forgetting about the chairs, and the game ends up opening some kind of portal that brings destructive creatures into the park. What started as the simplest job in the world turns into a fight for survival. The birthday party is ruined, the park is trashed, and Benson is furious. But Mordecai and Rigby technically did defeat the threat, so they live to see another day. This episode perfectly captures the heart of Regular Show. The mundane becomes extraordinary. The stakes are always higher than they should be, and Mordecai and Rigby always find a way to both cause and fix the problem. This formula played out over and over again across the first 2 seasons. And it never got old because the writers were incredibly creative with where each episode would go. In caffeinated concert tickets, Mordecai and Rigby need money to buy tickets to see their favorite band, Fist Pump. They try to earn the cash by working overtime, but they cannot stay awake. So they make a deal with a mysterious businessman and a coffee bean to keep them fueled with coffee. Naturally, this deal comes with terrible consequences, and the whole thing spirals into a supernatural nightmare just because 2 guys wanted to go to a concert. In Death Punchies, Rigby gets tired of losing at a game called Punchies, which is basically just taking turns punching each other. He is so bad at it that literally everyone beats him, even Pops. So Rigby goes to a place called Death Kwon Do to learn a special move that will finally let him win. The dojo teaches him a deadly punch technique, and when he uses it on Mordecai, things go way too far. It is a classic early Regular Show episode because it takes the most pointless conflict imaginable, 2 friends arguing about a punching game, and turns it into something genuinely dangerous. One of the most important early episodes is Free Cake from Season 1. In this one, Mordecai and Rigby find out that there is free cake at the snack bar for anyone throwing a party, so they decide to use Skip's upcoming birthday as an excuse. But this episode is important for a much bigger reason than cake. It is the first time the show reveals that Skips must perform a special ceremonial dance every year on his birthday to maintain his immortality. If he does not do the dance, he loses his eternal life. This tiny detail, dropped casually in a Season 1 episode about free cake, would become one of the most important pieces of mythology in the entire series. The show did this a lot in the early seasons. It would hide these little pieces of information inside episodes that seemed like they were just about nothing, and then years later, those details would come back in a huge way. Another standout from Season 1 is Rigby's body, where Rigby goes on a junk food spree after finding out that snack bar food is free for park employees. Mordecai stops after a while, but Rigby keeps going, eating so much garbage that his body literally leaves him. His physical body just gets up and walks away because it is so fed up with how Rigby treats it. This is such a perfectly regular show concept. A guy eats too much junk food, and instead of just getting a stomachache like a normal person, his body gains its own consciousness and abandons him. Over the Top is one of the darker early episodes, and one that really showed what the show was capable of. Mordecai and Rigby challenge each other to an arm wrestling match, but Rigby, knowing he will lose, secretly tries to cheat by challenging Skips instead. The problem is that Skips does not know his own strength. When he arm wrestles Rigby, he accidentally kills him. Yes, kills him. In a cartoon that airs on Cartoon Network, Rigby is dead. Skips, filled with guilt, then has to go to the afterlife and challenge Death himself to a game to win Rigby's soul back. Death is an actual character on this show. He is a skeleton in a robe who speaks with a British accent, loves making bets, and keeps trying to collect the souls of the park workers. Skips beats Death and brings Rigby back to life. But the episode establishes that death is a real thing in this world, and that the consequences of the character's actions can be genuinely serious. This is something that set regular show apart from almost every other cartoon on the network at the time. The show was not afraid to go to dark places. Characters could get hurt. Characters could die. There were real stakes hiding underneath all the comedy. And even though the show always resolved things by the end of the episode, you never quite knew how far things were going to go before they got fixed. That unpredictability is what kept people coming back. Season 2 expanded on everything that worked in Season 1, while starting to add just a little bit of depth to the characters. The premiere, Hello Governor, revealed that Rigby is actually terrified of horror movies. After watching a scary British film about a haunted taxi, Rigby starts having nightmares and cannot sleep. The whole gang has to help him face his fear. It is a small character detail, but it added a layer to Rigby that the show would continue to build on. Underneath all his bravado and loudness, Rigby is actually kind of a scaredy cat. The episode It's Time from Season 2 is one of the most memorable early episodes, and one that fans still talk about today. Mordecai is jealous that Rigby is going to the movies with Margaret, the girl Mordecai has a crush on, and in a fit of frustration, Mordecai ends up pushing Rigby off a microwave and accidentally killing him. Again. Mordecai then has to go through a series of time warps to try and fix what he did. The episode is dark, surreal, and emotionally heavy for what is supposed to be a comedy show, and it showed that the writers were not afraid to explore the uglier sides of these characters. Mordecai's jealousy, his immaturity, and the way his emotions can get the better of him are all on full display here. And these traits would become central to his character as the show went on. But for every dark episode, there were plenty of light and fun ones too. In A Bunch of Baby Ducks, Mordecai and Rigby find baby ducks in a fountain while cleaning it and have to figure out what to do with them. The ducks imprint on Rigby and start following him everywhere. It is adorable and wholesome and completely ridiculous when the ducks end up combining into a giant duck warrior to fight off a villain. This kind of tonal range is what made regular shows so special. One episode could make you genuinely emotional, and the next one could have you laughing at baby ducks forming a giant robot. My Mom from Season 2 gave us one of the show's best character dynamics. Muscleman's "my mom" jokes had been annoying Mordecai and Rigby since the beginning. But in this episode, they actually spend time hanging out with Muscleman and discover that underneath all the annoying jokes and pranks, he is actually not a terrible guy. Rigby starts to warm up to his sense of humor, while Mordecai refuses to. The episode ends with Muscleman and his brother pulling a massive prank on both of them, resetting the rivalry. But the seed was planted. Muscleman was more than just an annoying coworker, and the show would keep developing that idea season after season. Season 2 also gave us This Is My Jam, an episode where Mordecai and Rigby get a song stuck in their heads. The song is called Summertime Lovin' in the Summer Time, And it was actually written by regular show staff member Sean Zealis, specifically for the episode. The catchy tune ends up manifesting as a physical creature made of tape that terrorizes the park. To fight it, Mordecai and Rigby have to create an even catchier song to overpower it. The episode is hilarious and a perfect example of the show's ability to turn the most relatable, everyday experience, having a song stuck in your head, into a full-scale battle for survival. Throughout these first 2 seasons, the show also established its unique connection to the 1980s. The music, the references, the entire feel of the show is soaked in 80s and 90s nostalgia, from the synth-heavy soundtrack composed by Mark Mothersbaugh to entire episodes that are basically love letters to 80s movies and culture. The episode Over the Top, where Skip's arm wrestles to save Rigby, is named after and directly references the 1987 Sylvester Stallone arm wrestling movie. Weekend at Benson's has the characters dragging around an unconscious Benson in a direct reference to the 1989 movie Weekend at Bernie's. The show was constantly pulling from the pop culture of that era, and it gave regular show an identity that no other cartoon on television had. By the end of Season 2, regular show had built a strong foundation. The characters were established, the formula worked, and the audience was hooked. The show was consistently pulling in over 2 million viewers per week and had earned the respect of both kids and adults. But these first 2 seasons were really just the beginning. The characters had been introduced, but they had not grown yet. We knew who they were, but we did not know who they could become. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That was about to change. Because starting in Season 3, the show began introducing something it had been missing up to that point: real, ongoing relationships. And the first and biggest one started with Mordecai walking into a coffee shop, seeing a red robin named Margaret behind the counter, and completely forgetting how to form a sentence. Section 3. Mordecai's Hopeless Crush, the Margaret Saga, Seasons 1 to 4. Now, if you have ever had a crush on someone and completely lost the ability to act like a normal human being around them, then you already understand Mordecai's entire personality for the first 4 seasons of this show. Because from the moment Margaret Smith showed up on screen, Mordecai turned from a relatively cool and laid-back guy into an absolute mess. And honestly, that is what made this whole storyline so painfully relatable. Margaret first appeared in the Season 1 episode Caffeinated Concert Tickets. She is a red-breasted robin who worked as a waitress at the coffee shop, which was located right across the street from the park. She worked there alongside her best friend Eileen, a small, quiet, glasses-wearing mole who was kind and smart but very shy. The coffee shop became one of the most important locations in the entire show, not because of the food or the drinks, but because it gave Mordecai an excuse to leave work and go see Margaret on a regular basis. And Mordecai needed those excuses because he could not just walk up to Margaret and tell her how he felt. That would have been way too easy. Instead, Mordecai would drag Rigby along to the coffee shop over and over again, pretending that he just wanted coffee or food, when really he just wanted to be near Margaret. Rigby knew exactly what was going on. Everyone knew what was going on. Margaret probably knew what was going on. But Mordecai could never bring himself to actually say the words, and that inability to express his feelings became one of the defining traits of his character for years. Throughout Seasons 1 and 2, Mordecai's crush on Margaret was mostly played for comedy. He would get nervous around her, say something awkward, and then the episode would move on to whatever supernatural disaster was happening that week. Margaret was not really a full character in these early seasons. She was more of a goal for Mordecai, someone he was always trying to reach but never quite getting to. She would show up at the coffee shop, be friendly and kind, and Mordecai would spiral into a puddle of anxiety. That was basically the extent of it. But the show started giving this storyline more weight as it went on. In the Season 2 episode Do Me a Solid, Mordecai asks Rigby to do him a series of favors so that he can get some alone time with Margaret. Rigby agrees, but he keeps cashing in the favors at the worst possible moments, putting Mordecai in increasingly embarrassing situations. The whole episode is about Mordecai trying to set up the perfect moment with Margaret, and every single attempt falling apart because of outside interference. It is funny, but it also starts to show just how much Mordecai actually cares about this girl. He is not just casually interested. He is willing to go through all kinds of humiliation just for a chance to spend time with her. One of the biggest early moments in this storyline comes in the Season 3 episode Butt Dial. Mordecai accidentally pocket dials Margaret while he is talking to Rigby about his feelings for her. He leaves this long, rambling voicemail where he basically admits everything. How much he likes her, how nervous she makes him, all of it. When he realizes what happened, he completely panics. The entire episode becomes a mission to delete that voicemail before Margaret can hear it. Mordecai and Rigby break into the phone company, fight through all kinds of obstacles, and go to extreme lengths just to erase this message. And in the end, Margaret does hear part of it. But instead of things going badly, she actually seems touched by what he said. It is one of those moments where you can see that Margaret has feelings for Mordecai too, but neither one of them is brave enough to make the first real move. The thing that made Mordecai's crush so frustrating to watch, in a good way, is that Margaret was not always single. Throughout the early seasons, she kept showing up with different boyfriends. There was always some other guy in the picture, and every time Mordecai worked up the courage to make a move, he would find out that Margaret was already seeing someone. It happened again and again. Mordecai would get his hopes up, only to have them crushed. And yet, he kept coming back. He kept going to the coffee shop. He kept trying. For better or worse, Mordecai was not the kind of guy who gave up on his feelings easily, even when giving up might have been the healthier choice. The Season 3 finale, Bad Kiss, is where things finally started to shift. In this episode, Mordecai, Rigby, Margaret, and Eileen go to see a movie together. When they come back to the house for a drink, Mordecai leaves his wallet in Margaret's car. She goes to help him get it, and when they get close to each other, the moment finally happens. Margaret leans in, Mordecai leans in, and they kiss for the first time. After 3 entire seasons of build-up, it finally happened. But this is regular show, so of course it cannot just be that simple. The kiss goes wrong because Mordecai had eaten a chili dog earlier, and his breath is terrible. Margaret pulls away, and the moment is ruined. Mordecai, devastated and embarrassed, then goes on a whole adventure involving time travel to try and fix the bad kiss. The episode ends on a note that is both hopeful and bittersweet. The kiss happened, which means the feelings are real on both sides. But it did not go the way either of them wanted, which means there is still a long road ahead before these two figure things out. Season 4 is where the Margaret storyline really kicks into high gear. The show starts to treat their relationship more seriously, and Margaret herself becomes a more developed character. She is no longer just the girl at the coffee shop. We learn more about her life, her family, and her goals. One interesting detail about Margaret's family that the show reveals is that her father, Frank Smith, is a strong and stern human man, while the rest of her family are all birds like her. The show never fully explains why her father is a different species. It is just one of those regular show things that you accept and move on from. In the Season 4 episode, Picking Up Margaret, Mordecai drives Margaret to the airport for a college interview. On the way, they end up being chased by a group of troublemakers, and the whole trip turns into a wild adventure. But at the end of it, after all the chaos, Margaret kisses Mordecai properly. Not a bad kiss this time, a real one. And from that point on, things between them start to move forward in a real way. Mordecai and Margaret begin actually dating during Season 4, and for a while, things are good. After 3.5 seasons of failed attempts, awkward moments, and missed connections, Mordecai finally got the girl. The two of them are together, they are happy, and fans of the show were thrilled. It felt like the payoff that everyone had been waiting for. Mordecai had grown from a guy who could not string a sentence together around his crush to someone who was actually in a relationship. It was a huge moment for his character. But if you know anything about regular show, you know that the show does not let its characters have nice things for very long. And the way this relationship ended is still one of the most painful moments in the entire series. The Season 4 finale is called Stake Me Amadeus, and it is the episode that broke a lot of hearts. Mordecai takes Margaret out to a fancy restaurant because he has something important he wants to ask her. He wants to officially ask her to be his girlfriend. He has planned this whole evening, he is nervous but excited, and everything seems to be going perfectly. But before he can ask the question, Margaret tells him something first. She got accepted into her dream college. The college she had always wanted to attend. But it is far away, and going there means she has to leave town. She cannot stay and be with Mordecai. She has to go. Margaret is clearly devastated by this. She does not want to leave Mordecai. The show makes it very clear that she has real feelings for him. In that moment, she says she cannot be his girlfriend, and she starts crying. She tells him that for the first time, she felt like she was in a relationship that could actually go somewhere, and having to give that up is breaking her heart. But she cannot pass up this opportunity. This is the school she has always dreamed of going to, and she has to follow that dream even if it means losing Mordecai. Mordecai is crushed. Absolutely crushed. Margaret runs out of the restaurant in tears, and Mordecai is left sitting there, alone, at a table set for two. After everything he went through, after all the failed attempts, the bad breath, the other boyfriends, the years of pining, he finally had her, and now she is gone. The episode ends with one of the saddest images the show ever produced. Mordecai sitting by himself, completely heartbroken, while the restaurant carries on around him like nothing happened. What makes this episode hit so hard is that nobody is the villain. Margaret is not a bad person for leaving. She made the right choice for her future, and the show respects that. Mordecai is not wrong for being upset. He just lost the girl he spent years falling in love with. There is no supernatural enemy to fight, no magical solution to fix things, no keyboard that can make it all go away. It is just life. Sometimes the person you love has to leave, and there is nothing you can do about it. For a show that usually solves its problems with fistfights and explosions, choosing to end a season on something so quiet and so real was a bold move. And it worked. After Margaret leaves, Mordecai falls into a period of genuine depression. He is sad, he is moping around the park, and he does not know what to do with himself. His friends try to cheer him up, but there is not much anyone can say when you are going through a breakup like that. This period of sadness is important because it shows that regular show was not afraid to let its characters feel real pain. Mordecai does not just bounce back the next episode like nothing happened. He carries this loss with him, and it affects how he acts for a long time afterward. The Margaret saga of seasons 1 through 4 is one of the most well-crafted romantic storylines in animated television. It took its time. It built things up slowly. It gave the audience years to root for these two characters to get together. And then it pulled the rug out in the most realistic way possible. Not with a villain or a twist, but with a life decision that millions of people face every day. Do you stay with the person you love, or do you chase the future you have been working toward? Margaret chose her future, and Mordecai had to learn how to live with that. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But here's the thing about Mordecai. He does not stay heartbroken forever. Because sometime after Margaret leaves, Mordecai crosses paths with someone new. A cloud girl with a big personality, a love of video games, and a very dangerous temper. Her name is CJ, and she is about to make Mordecai's love life a whole lot more complicated. Section 4. The Immortal Yeti, Skip's tragic origin story. If you have been watching regular show from the beginning, there is one question that probably crossed your mind more than any other. Why does Skips always skip? Every single time he moves, he skips. He does not walk. He does not run. He skips everywhere he goes. Whether he is heading to fix a broken machine, going to fight some supernatural monster, or just crossing the park to get to his garage. It is the most obvious thing about him, and yet for the longest time, the show never explained it. They just let it sit there, this weird little detail about the strongest and wisest character on the show, and expected you to accept it without asking questions. But regular show was playing the long game, because when the show finally did explain why Skips always skips, it turned out to be one of the saddest and most beautiful stories the entire series ever told. And it all went down in a half-hour special in Season 5 called Skip's Story. Before we get into that episode, though, we need to talk about what we already knew about Skips before this point. From the very beginning, Skips was established as the guy who fixes everything. Whenever Mordecai and Rigby caused some kind of disaster, which was basically every episode, Skips was the one who knew what to do. He had seen it all before. He understood things about the supernatural world that nobody else at the park could even begin to wrap their heads around. And the reason he knew so much is because he had been alive for a very, very long time. In the Season 1 episode Free Cake, the show revealed that Skips is immortal, but his immortality comes with a condition. Every year on his birthday, he has to perform a special spirit dance for a group of beings called the Guardians of Eternal Youth. If he does the dance, he stays immortal for another year. If he misses it, he loses his eternal life. This was a huge piece of information that the show just casually dropped in an episode about Mordecai and Rigby wanting free birthday cake. At the time, it raised a million questions. Who are the Guardians of Eternal Youth? Why did they give Skips immortality? What happened in his past that led to all of this? And the show made us wait years for the answers. We got small pieces of Skip's backstory along the way. In the Season 3 episode Fists of Justice, we learned that Skips has an ancient enemy named Clorgbane the Destroyer. Clorgbane is a massive, powerful being who returns to Earth every 157 years, and when he does, Skips has to fight him using special weapons called the Fists of Justice, which are basically immortal gauntlets powerful enough to go toe-to-toe with Clorgbane. In that episode, Skips gets injured and cannot fight, so Mordecai and Rigby have to take his place and use the Fists of Justice to defeat Clorgbane themselves. They manage to win, but during the battle, one of the Guardians of Eternal Youth a member named Archibald is killed by Clorgbane before he is sent flying away. As Clorgbane disappears, he vows to return in another 157 years. This episode told us that Skips has a recurring duty that comes with his immortality. He is not just alive forever for no reason. He was given eternal life specifically so he could keep fighting this enemy every time he comes back. But we still did not know the full story. We did not know how Skips and Clorgbane's rivalry started. We did not know why the Guardians chose Skips specifically, and we did not know the real reason behind his name. Then came Skip's story in Season 5, and everything fell into place. The episode begins in the present day with Mordecai and Rigby on a break, sitting with Skips. They start asking him about his past, and Skips, in a rare moment of openness, decides to tell them the whole story. He starts by saying, and this is a fun detail, "A long time ago, in a high school far, far away." That line is a clear nod to Star Wars, which makes perfect sense because Skips is voiced by Mark Hamill, the actor who played Luke Skywalker. It is one of those little moments that the show throws in for fans who are paying attention. The story flashes back to somewhere in the 1800s. Skips was not always called Skips. His original name was Walks, and young Walks was nothing like the calm, wise, unshakable guy we know in the present. He was a teenage yeti with a temper and a habit of getting into fights. He had been expelled from 3 different high schools for starting brawls. He was rebellious, reckless, and could not stay out of trouble. Before ending up at his final school, Walks had adventures with his friend Samson. The two of them did all kinds of wild things together, including chasing storms and going into something called a timonado. These early adventures showed that even as a young guy, Walks was drawn to danger and excitement. But his fighting and troublemaking kept getting him kicked out of places. And by the time he arrived at his last high school, he had been given a very clear warning. One more fight, and he was done for good. At this new school, Walks met the Guardians of Eternal Youth, who in this setting were part of something called the Immortal Student Council. The Guardians were a group of 5 beings who looked like babies but were incredibly ancient and powerful. Their names were later revealed across different episodes to be Reginald, Gary, Oswald, Boswald, and Griswold. In this high school setting, they kept an eye on things and tried to maintain order. And they had a problem. Their evil brother, Clorgbane the Destroyer, was also at the school, and he was the worst bully anyone had ever seen. He started fights, intimidated everyone, and nobody had the courage to stand up to him. Nobody except Walks, because Walks was the only student at that school who was not afraid of Clorgbane. He had been fighting his whole life, and he was not about to stop now just because some oversized bully was throwing his weight around. But the most important thing that happened to Walks at this school was not his rivalry with Clorgbane. It was meeting a girl named Desdemona, though everyone called her Mona. Mona was kind, smart, and completely charming. She was voiced by Grey Delisle, and from the moment Walks spilled cafeteria soup all over her by accident, the two of them were drawn to each other. Their relationship developed quickly and naturally. They spent all their time together, laughing, talking, and doing one thing in particular that became deeply important. They would skip together. Everywhere they went, they skipped side by side. It was their thing, their special little habit that belonged only to them. Now, the setting of this flashback is one of the most interesting things about the episode. The story takes place in the 1800s, but the whole thing looks and feels like an 80s high school movie. Mona dresses in a style that feels more like the 1980s than the 1800s. The prom has an under-the-sea theme, and during the big dance scene, the song that plays is Forever Young, which was not released until the 1980s. The show does this on purpose. Regular Show has always lived in this space where the past and the 80s blend together into something that does not match any real time period, but somehow feels right. It is part of the show's charm, and Skip's story leans into it completely. Everything comes to a head at the school prom. Walks and Mona are having a wonderful time together, dancing and enjoying the night. But Clorgbane shows up and starts destroying everything. He attacks the school, causes massive damage, and even goes after the headmaster. The Guardians of Eternal Youth know that Clorgbane has to be stopped, but they also know that no ordinary person can beat him. They need someone strong enough and brave enough to use a special weapon they have created: the Fists of Justice. Walks steps up to fight Clorgbane, but there is a problem. He does not have the Fists of Justice yet. He tries to take on Clorgbane with his bare hands, and he is completely overpowered. Clorgbane is too strong. He crafts a massive mace and swings it to finish Walks off. And this is where the story becomes a tragedy. Mona sees that Walks is about to be killed. Without hesitating, she dives in and pushes him out of the way. The mace does not hit her directly, But the force of Clorgbane's swing creates a massive crack that travels across the floor, up the wall, and into the ceiling. A section of the ceiling collapses and falls directly on top of Mona. She does not survive. At that exact moment, one of the Guardians, a member named Gareth, manages to deliver the fists of justice to Walks. Filled with grief and rage over what just happened to the girl he loved, Walks puts on the fists and unleashes everything he has on Clorgbane. He beats him. He sends Clorgbane flying out into space, away from Earth, defeated but not destroyed. Clorgbane would survive and return 157 years later, which is exactly what happened in the Season 3 episode, Fists of Justice. But the victory means nothing to Walks. He rushes back to where Mona was, hoping against hope that she is okay. But all he finds is the necklace he had given her earlier, lying in the rubble. Mona is gone. The girl who skipped beside him, the girl who made him laugh, the girl who saved his life, is dead. And Walks could not save her. The episode then jumps forward in time. We see Walks years later and he is a broken man. He has grown scruffy facial hair and looks completely defeated. The narration from present-day Skips tells Mordecai and Rigby that this was a very rough time in his life. The Guardians of Eternal Youth eventually call Walks back and offer him a deal. They need someone to fight Clorgbane every time he returns, once every 157 years. They want to make Walks immortal so he can be that fighter. But there is one condition. He has to choose a new name. Walks thinks about it. And in that moment, his mind goes back to Mona. He remembers all the times they skipped together. He remembers how happy she was, how happy they both were, moving side by side in that silly, joyful way that was theirs and theirs alone. And he makes his choice. He will not be Walks anymore. From this day forward, his name is Skips, and he will skip everywhere he goes for the rest of his immortal life, so that he will never forget the girl he lost. Before we jump back to the present, let me also mention that Skips' vow to Skip was first hinted at in the Season 3 episode Diary. In that episode, when Mordecai and Rigby accidentally destroy Margaret's diary and ask Skips for help, it is briefly revealed that Skips skips because he had a lover who skipped with him all the time, and when he lost her, he vowed to skip for the rest of his life, so he could never forget the memories they shared. Skip's story then expanded on this and showed us the full picture. Back in the present, after Skips finishes telling his story, there is a beautiful moment of silence. Mordecai, who is rarely at a loss for words, quietly says that the story was kind of a downer. Rigby wonders if Skips ever ended up graduating, and Skips just sits there, lost in his memories. Mordecai, with tears in his eyes, quietly leads Rigby away so that Skips can have a moment alone. It is one of the most emotionally powerful scenes in the entire series, and it happens without any explosions, any supernatural enemies, or any world-ending stakes. It is just a guy remembering the girl he loved, and two friends who care enough to give him space. Skips' story changed the way fans looked at the entire show. Every time Skips skipped across the screen from that point forward, it carried a completely different weight. What used to be a funny little character detail was now a constant reminder of love and loss, and the lengths someone will go to in order to keep a memory alive. Skips has been alive for centuries. He has fought Clorgbane multiple times. He has watched the world change around him while he stays the same. And through all of it, every single day, he skips. For Mona. Always for Mona. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Skips was carrying centuries of heartbreak on his shoulders, the show was also building something new back at the park. Something that would change the group forever. A quiet, unassuming goat named Thomas had just started working as an intern, and nobody had any idea what he was really there for. Section 5. The New Intern. Thomas's Arrival and the Rise of Continuity. Season 4. Up until this point in regular show's run, the series had mostly been a collection of standalone adventures. You could pick up almost any episode from seasons 1 or 2, watch it without any context, and have a great time. The stories were self-contained, the characters stayed more or less the same from week to week, and the biggest ongoing thread was Mordecai's crush on Margaret, which moved at the pace of a snail climbing a mountain. But starting with Season 3, and really kicking into gear with Season 4, regular show began to change in a major way. The show started building real continuity. Past events were referenced, character backstories were explored, relationships developed and had lasting consequences. And the episode that signaled this shift more than any other was the Season 4 premiere, Exit 9B. Exit 9B is one of the most ambitious episodes regular show had ever attempted at that point. The story centers around Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr., the son of a villain the park crew had dealt with before. See, in an earlier episode, Mordecai and Rigby had beaten a giant floating head named Garrett Bobby Ferguson at an arcade game, and he exploded. Now his son wants revenge, and his plan is massive. He uses a portal to bring back every single villain the park crew had ever faced up to that point. All of them. Every monster, every supernatural threat, every bad guy from the first 3 seasons comes back through this portal, and the park is thrown into total chaos. This was the show essentially saying, hey, everything that happened before this matters now. All those standalone episodes, all those one-off villains, they are part of a bigger world, and that world has consequences. The park crew has to band together to fight off this army of returning enemies, and it is one of the most action-packed episodes the show had done. Skips is fighting, Benson is fighting, Muscleman and High Five Ghost are in the thick of it, and even the Guardians of Eternal Youth show up to help. It feels like a season finale, even though it is actually a season premiere, and it set the tone for everything Season 4 would become. But Exit 9B is important for another reason too. It is the episode that introduces Thomas. Thomas is a goat. An average-sized goat with tan-colored fur, longish bangs, a small brown beard on his chin, and gray horns on top of his head. He shows up at the park looking for an internship, and Benson hires him on the spot. In this first appearance, Thomas seems like the most normal, boring character on the show. He is just a regular college student looking for work experience. He is polite, he is quiet, and compared to the rest of the park crew, he is completely unremarkable. He blends into the background in a way that no other character on the show ever had. Thomas quickly becomes part of the group, tagging along on their adventures and showing up at staff meetings. But he is mostly treated as the low man on the totem pole. Muscleman in particular loves to mess with him, making him do embarrassing things and using him as the target of his pranks. Thomas takes it all without much complaint, which just makes him seem even more like a normal, slightly shy young guy who is just trying to get through his internship without causing any trouble. And here is the thing. The show wanted you to think that. The writers wanted Thomas to feel like a background character, someone who was just there to fill space and maybe get a laugh every now and then. Because the writers had a plan for Thomas, and that plan would not be revealed until 2 full seasons later. But we will get to that. For now, just keep Thomas in the back of your mind. Remember that he is there, he is quiet, and he is watching everything. Season 4 was not just about new characters, though. It was about digging deeper into the characters we already knew, and showing us sides of them we had never seen before. And one of the most emotional moments of the entire season, maybe one of the most emotional moments in the whole show, involved Muscleman. Now, up to this point, Muscleman had mostly been defined by 3 things: his annoying "my mom" jokes, his love of pulling pranks, and his relationship with his girlfriend Starla. He was the loud, obnoxious coworker that Mordecai and Rigby had to put up with. But the Season 4 episode Trucker Hall of Fame completely changed how the audience saw him. In this episode, Muscleman gets a phone call from his brother, and the news is devastating. Their father, known as Muscle Dad, has died. He was killed in a bear mauling. It is sudden, it is brutal, and it hits Muscleman like a train. His father was a trucker, and his dying wish was for his trucker hat ashes to be spread at the Trucker Hall of Fame. So Muscleman, along with Mordecai and Rigby, goes on a road trip to honor his father's last request. This episode is heartbreaking in a way that regular show had only hinted at before. Muscleman, the guy who spends every episode making terrible jokes and pulling stupid pranks, is genuinely grieving. He is trying to hold it together for the sake of the mission, but you can see the pain underneath everything he does. The road trip itself is full of obstacles and challenges, because this is still regular show and nothing ever goes smoothly. But the emotional core of the episode is always Muscleman dealing with the loss of his dad. By the time he finally spreads the ashes at the Trucker Hall of Fame, it is a genuinely moving moment. You feel for this guy. You understand him in a way that you did not before. And from this point forward, Muscleman is no longer just the annoying prankster. He is a fully developed character with real depth and real pain. Season 4 also continued to develop the dynamic between Benson and the rest of the park crew. In the earlier seasons, Benson was pretty one-note. He yelled at Mordecai and Rigby, he threatened to fire them, and that was basically it. But starting around Season 3, and really picking up in Season 4, the show began peeling back the layers of Benson's character and showing us why he is the way he is. The show made it clear that Benson grew up in a verbally abusive household, which explains a lot about his temper and his need for control. He is not just angry for no reason. He is a guy who has been through a lot, who takes his job seriously because it is the one thing in his life he feels he can control, and who genuinely cares about his employees even when he is screaming at them. There are moments scattered throughout Season 4 where you can see Benson soften, especially toward Mordecai. Mordecai shows more maturity and a willingness to learn from his mistakes than Rigby does, and Benson notices that. The two of them start to develop a quiet mutual respect that was not there in the earlier seasons. Benson also has terrible luck with romance, and Season 4 starts to explore that side of his life. He tries to date, he tries to find someone who understands him, and it never quite works out. The show treats his romantic failures with a surprising amount of sympathy. Benson is not a joke when it comes to love. He is a lonely guy who wants to connect with someone but keeps getting in his own way. This ongoing thread of Benson searching for love and respect would continue all the way through to the final season. The rivalry between the park and East Pines also picked up during this era. Benson has an ongoing feud with Gene, the manager of the rival East Pines Park. Gene is everything Benson is not. He is smooth, he is confident, and he always seems to come out on top. Their rivalry was first introduced in the Season 3 episode Prankless, where a prank war between the two parks spiraled out of control. By Season 4, the tension between Benson and Gene had become a recurring part of the show. Gene would show up to taunt Benson, Benson would get fired up, and the two parks would end up in some kind of competition that always escalated far beyond what it should have been. It was a fun dynamic that gave Benson a rival outside of Mordecai and Rigby, someone who pushed his buttons in a completely different way. Season 4 also gave us some of the best episodes in the show's entire run. Excellent is often considered one of the greatest regular show episodes ever made. In this one, Rigby tries to complete a food challenge at a restaurant that involves eating a massive omelet. If you finish it, you win a trucker hat. Rigby cannot handle it and ends up in a coma. A legitimate, medically serious coma. He is rushed to the hospital, and the doctors are not sure if he is going to wake up. When Benson dismisses the situation and makes a careless comment about it just being another one of their stupid stunts, Mordecai snaps. He punches Benson right in the face, full-on decks him. And then he tells Benson off, saying that Benson constantly makes everything about work and that he has no real friends. It is a shocking moment. Mordecai has never reacted like this before, but seeing his best friend lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying, and having his boss brush it off like it does not matter, breaks something inside him. Mordecai then takes it upon himself to complete the omelet challenge on Rigby's behalf, because for some reason, completing the challenge is the only way to wake Rigby up from the coma. He has to face down the restaurant's management, solve a series of challenges, and ultimately win the trucker hat. When Rigby finally wakes up and sees that Mordecai won the hat for him, it is one of the purest moments of friendship the show ever produced. Excellent won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Short-Format Animated Program, and it completely deserved it. The Season 4 episode Fancy Restaurant is another great example of the show's growing maturity. In this one, Muscleman has a dinner date with Starla and her parents at a high-end restaurant, and he is terrified. Muscleman knows he does not have the manners or the sophistication to impress Starla's family, so Mordecai and Rigby step in to help. They basically give Muscleman a crash course in being a gentleman, teaching him how to dress, how to talk, and how to behave at a fancy dinner. It is essentially a slacker comedy version of My Fair Lady, and it is both hilarious and surprisingly sweet. The fact that Mordecai and Rigby, two guys who can barely take care of themselves, are the ones teaching someone else how to be classy is peak regular show comedy. But underneath the laughs, the episode is really about Muscleman wanting to be worthy of the woman he loves. And that is something the show takes seriously. Speaking of Starla, her relationship with Muscleman became increasingly important during Season 4. What started as a joke, this loud, obnoxious guy dating an equally loud, obnoxious woman, turned into one of the most genuine love stories on the show. Muscleman and Starla are not a conventional couple by any stretch of the imagination, but their feelings for each other are completely real. They support each other, they fight for each other, and as the show goes on, it becomes clear that Muscleman's relationship with Starla is the most stable and committed romance in the entire series. While Mordecai is fumbling around with his love life, Muscleman knows exactly who he wants to be with, and he never wavers. That contrast between the two characters becomes more and more obvious as the seasons go on. Season 4 ended, as we covered in the last section, with the devastating breakup between Mordecai and Margaret in Stake Me Amadeus. But while that ending was focused on heartbreak, the season as a whole was really about growth. Every major character took a step forward. Muscleman showed his emotional depth. Benson showed his vulnerability. The park itself became a more connected place, where past events actually mattered, and where the characters' histories shaped their present. Thomas arrived and settled into the group, quietly observing everything from the sidelines. Regular Show was no longer just a funny cartoon about two slackers. It was becoming a show about growing up, about dealing with loss, about finding your place in the world, and about the relationships that hold you together while you figure all of that out. The standalone adventures were still there, the supernatural chaos was still there, but now there was a foundation underneath it all that gave every joke and every crisis real emotional weight. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this deep dive, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously and lets us keep making content like this for you all. And speaking of emotional weight, Mordecai was about to enter the most complicated chapter of his life. Because with Margaret gone, a cloud girl named CJ was about to walk back into the picture, and what started as a second chance at love would eventually turn into one of the messiest love triangles in cartoon history. Section 6. CJ, the Cloud Girl. Mordecai's second chance at love. Seasons 3 to 6. After Margaret left for college at the end of Season 4, Mordecai was a mess. He was sad, he was moping around the park, and he had no idea what to do with himself. The girl he had spent years trying to be with was gone, and he was stuck in this emotional hole that he could not climb out of. But what a lot of people forget is that Mordecai had actually met someone else before Margaret even left. Someone he clicked with instantly. Someone who shared his interests, matched his energy, and who he threw away the second he thought he still had a chance with Margaret. That someone was CJ. CJ, short for Cloudy J, first appeared way back in the Season 3 episode, Yes Dude Yes. Here is how it happened. Mordecai saw Margaret at the coffee shop one day and noticed that she appeared to be wearing an engagement ring. He immediately assumed that she was getting married to someone else, and he was crushed. Convinced that Margaret was off the table forever, Rigby signed Mordecai up for an online dating site called Couple Corral. And through that site, Mordecai matched with CJ. CJ is a cloud humanoid. She has white skin, a cloud-like head with what looks like a ponytail, and she wears a red, orange, and white striped tank top with brown shorts and small black boots. She was voiced by Linda Cardellini, and from the moment she and Mordecai started hanging out, it was obvious that these two had incredible chemistry. They liked the same things. They played video games together, they went to concerts together, they genuinely had fun in each other's company. CJ was not just a love interest. She was someone who Mordecai could actually be himself around, without overthinking everything the way he did with Margaret. But here is where Mordecai made his first big mistake with CJ, and it would not be his last. Near the end of the episode, Mordecai found out that Margaret was not actually engaged. The ring was not what he thought it was. And the second he learned that Margaret was still single, he basically forgot CJ existed. He abandoned their date, ran off to find Margaret, and left CJ behind without a proper explanation. CJ was understandably furious, and when CJ gets angry, things get dangerous. Because she has a very unique ability. When her emotions get intense, especially when she is upset or enraged, her skin turns a reddish gray, and her entire body transforms into a massive, destructive storm cloud. She can create lightning, heavy rain, powerful winds, basically a full-on hurricane. And in this episode, that is exactly what happened. CJ stormed out, literally, and she and Mordecai parted on terrible terms. This was the first time the audience saw the pattern that would define Mordecai's love life for the next 3 seasons. He had something good right in front of him, and he could not stop looking over his shoulder at what he used to have. CJ was great for him, everyone could see it. But Mordecai's heart was stuck on Margaret, and as long as Margaret was in the picture, he could not fully commit to anyone else. CJ did not show up again for a while after that. Margaret remained the focus of Mordecai's romantic life through the rest of Season 3 and all of Season 4. Leading up to their breakup in Stake Me Amadeus. But once Margaret was gone, and Mordecai was left heartbroken, the show brought CJ back into the picture in a way that felt natural and earned. In the Season 5 episode, New Year's Kiss, the park crew goes to a New Year's Eve party. Mordecai is still recovering from losing Margaret, and is not really in the mood to celebrate. But at midnight, in a crowded room full of people wearing masks, Mordecai ends up kissing someone without even knowing who it is. When the masks come off, he discovers that the person he kissed was CJ. Neither one of them planned it, it just happened. And from that awkward, accidental moment, a second chance was born. The following episode, Dodge This, picks up days after the kiss, with CJ and Mordecai competing against each other in a dodgeball tournament. The two of them are clearly still figuring out what the kiss meant and where they stand, but there is an energy between them that neither one can ignore. Over the course of Season 5, they slowly start spending more time together, and their relationship begins to rebuild from the wreckage of how things ended in Yes Dude Yes. One of the key episodes in their relationship is Real Date from season 5. In this one, Mordecai is preparing for a proper romantic date with CJ. But he discovers that he is still subscribed to Couple Corral, the dating site where they originally met. He tries to delete his account, but the site's owner, a character named Matchmaker McIntyre, will not let him go. McIntyre starts harassing Mordecai, trying to sabotage his date and get him to break up with CJ so he will stay on the site and make McIntyre money. The harassment gets so extreme that McIntyre actually fires a rocket at the couple during their date. Mordecai jumps in front of CJ to protect her, and the blast nearly kills him. He is saved by a charm bracelet he was wearing, which gets welded into the shape of a heart from the impact. CJ, believing Mordecai was dead for a moment, is overwhelmed with emotion. She takes the heart-shaped bracelet and wears it for the rest of their relationship. This episode showed that Mordecai genuinely cared about CJ. He was willing to risk his life for her. And for a while, it really seemed like these two were going to make it. But Regular Show is not a show that lets its characters off easy, and Mordecai's past was about to come back and blow everything up. In the season 6 episode Eileen Flat Screen, the show casually drops a bombshell. Margaret is back. She finished college, got a degree in journalism, and returned to town working as a news reporter. Nobody even noticed at first. The reveal happens through a television screen, almost as an afterthought. But for the audience, and especially for Mordecai, Margaret's return changed everything. The first major collision happened in Merry Christmas Mordecai, a season 6 episode set during Eileen's Christmas party. Both CJ and Margaret are attending. Mordecai spends the entire lead up to the party in a state of panic, terrified that having his current girlfriend and his ex in the same room is going to end in disaster. He is stressed, he is overthinking everything, and he is doing everything he can to keep the two of them apart. For most of the party, he actually manages to hold things together. He talks to CJ, he avoids Margaret, and things seem okay. But then Margaret finds him and they start talking, just talking. And they end up reminiscing about the good times they had together. The conversation is innocent enough, and it leads to a montage of their shared memories. But the montage ends with a memory of the two of them kissing on a roller coaster. And when the scene cuts back to the present, Mordecai and Margaret are kissing again. Right there, at the Christmas party. It was an accident. Neither one of them planned it. They got caught up in the moment, in the nostalgia, in the feelings that never fully went away. But none of that matters, because when they pull apart and look up, CJ is standing right there. She saw the whole thing. CJ does not transform into a hurricane this time. She does something worse. She cries. She runs out of the party, heartbroken and humiliated, and Mordecai is left standing there, knowing that he just did the one thing he promised himself he would not do. He hurt the girl who gave him a second chance. After CJ leaves, Mordecai breaks down and tries to explain himself, eventually telling CJ at the hospital in a later episode that he used to love Margaret, that their breakup deeply affected him, but that he is over her now and does not want to lose. CJ accepts his apology and the two of them reconcile. A mistletoe ends up hanging between them and they kiss, giving their relationship another shot, but the damage was done. The trust had cracked, and it would only keep cracking from here. In 1000th Chopper flight party, Margaret invites the park crew to celebrate her father's news helicopter reaching its 1000th flight. Mordecai is still uncomfortable being around Margaret and goes to extreme lengths to avoid her, even letting Rigby sabotage the party just to keep Margaret away from him. When he finally ends up on the helicopter with Margaret and they start having a normal, friendly conversation, CJ sees them from the ground and misinterprets the whole thing. She believes they are getting back together and completely loses control of her emotions. CJ transforms into a massive storm cloud and starts tearing the party apart with hurricane-force winds and lightning. She nearly kills Margaret and several other people. In the chaos, Margaret calms CJ down by telling her that she is in a relationship with Del Hanlon, a weekend sports anchor from her news station. This revelation stuns Mordecai and surprises Margaret's own parents. But it works. CJ powers down, the storm stops, and the immediate crisis is over. The problem is that Margaret lied. She was not actually dating Del Hanlon. She made it up on the spot to stop CJ from destroying everything. That lie unraveled in the season 6 episode, Not Great Double Date. To keep up the act, Margaret convinces Del Hanlon to pretend to be her boyfriend during a double date with Mordecai and CJ. But Del is an actor at heart and takes the fake relationship way too far. When a kiss cam at a sporting event lands on him and Margaret, she refuses to kiss him and the whole thing falls apart. Margaret is forced to come clean to CJ. She admits that she lied about dating Del. She admits that she made up the whole thing because she was tired of feeling like a tourist around her own friends. tired of the awkwardness and tension that followed her everywhere since she came back to town. And then CJ asks the question that changes everything. She asks Margaret if she still has feelings for Mordecai. And Margaret, with nowhere left to hide, tells the truth. She does. She still has feelings for Mordecai. CJ is devastated. She angrily says she does not understand why Margaret keeps trying to be around Mordecai when they did not even keep in touch after she left for college. CJ tries to calm herself down and says that being around Mordecai is fine, but the lying is what she cannot accept. She asks why Margaret would lie about something like this and answers her own question. There is only one reason she would lie. Because she still wants Mordecai. And with that, CJ leaves. Mordecai chases after her, and Margaret is left behind, unable to say what she wanted to say. All of this came to a head in the Season 6 finale, Dumped at the Altar. This episode is supposed to be about Muscleman and Starla's wedding, which we will talk about in detail later. But Mordecai's love triangle drama completely takes over. The tension between Mordecai, CJ, and Margaret is at a breaking point. Margaret calls Mordecai before the ceremony to apologize for the double date disaster. And Mordecai is so stressed about managing both women at the same event that he can barely function. During the ceremony, something snaps in Mordecai. He takes it upon himself to make a speech, but instead of talking about Muscleman and Starla, he starts rambling about his own love life. He talks about not knowing who the right person is, about being confused, about not knowing who his soulmate is. CJ sees exactly what is happening. She realizes that Mordecai is not over Margaret. Maybe he never was. She gives Mordecai back the charm bracelet he got her during their date in Real Date, the one that was shaped into a heart. And then she walks away. It is over. Mordecai, now having lost both Margaret and CJ, falls into a deep depression and ends up in a place called Dumptown, USA, a literal town for people who have been dumped. Rigby has to go there and bring him back, which is a small but important moment that shows how much Rigby has grown as a friend. The love triangle was finally resolved, at least partially, in the Season 7 episode, Just Friends. With both relationships over, Mordecai and Margaret end up spending an evening together, while Rigby and Eileen go to watch Rigby's brother Don compete in a martial arts event. During this night, a chef named Daisuke shows Mordecai and Margaret their potential future through magical sauce. They see that if they get together, they will get married, have children, buy a houseboat, and live happily for 50 years. It is a beautiful future. But instead of rushing back into things, both of them agree that they are still young and should take it easy on relationships for the time being. They agree to just be friends. And this time, they actually mean it. As for CJ, the show confirmed through its writers that she eventually became a professional dodgeball player, but cut off all contact with Mordecai, Margaret, Rigby, and Eileen. 25 years after the events of the show, CJ still had not spoken to any of them. The damage from the love triangle was permanent for her, and that is one of the saddest, quiet details in the entire series. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Mordecai's love life was a disaster from start to finish. But through all of that chaos, another story had been quietly building in the background. A story about a goat named Thomas, a secret identity, and a betrayal that nobody at the park ever saw coming. Section 7. The Real Thomas, the Russian Spy Twist. Remember Thomas? The quiet goat intern who showed up at the park in the Season 4 premiere and just kind of blended into the background for 2 full seasons? The guy who tagged along on adventures, sat quietly at staff meetings, and got bullied by Muscleman without ever really fighting back? The character that fans online were actually complaining about because he did not seem to have any purpose on the show? Well, it turns out there was a very good reason Thomas never stood out. He was not supposed to. Because Thomas was hiding something that nobody at the park, and nobody watching the show, ever saw coming. Thomas was a Russian spy. His real name was Nikolai. This reveal came in a half-hour special during Season 6 called The Real Thomas, and it completely changed how the audience looked at everything Thomas had done since his first appearance. Every quiet moment, every time he stood in the background, every phone call he took when nobody was paying attention, all of it suddenly made sense. Thomas was never just an intern. He was an undercover agent on a mission. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. According to the episode, Nikolai was born in Kyiv. He was abandoned as a baby, left out in the cold on a winter night, and was found and taken in by the Russian government. They raised him in a government nursery and trained him from childhood to become the perfect spy. He was turned into a weapon for Russia, loyal to the state above everything else. When he was old enough and skilled enough, he was given his assignment. He was sent to the United States by an organization called MOMM, which stood for the Minister of Meadow Management. His mission was to infiltrate a park, specifically the park where Mordecai, Rigby, and the rest of the crew worked, and steal it for Russia. Yes, steal the entire park. The whole thing. Russia wanted to improve their own park technology, and the plan was to physically take the park and transport it to Russia, using rockets that Thomas would secretly install underneath it. It sounds completely insane, and it is, but that is regular show for you. The most ridiculous things always turn out to be real. Thomas entered the United States under a fake identity and got himself hired as an intern at the park during the events of Exit 9B at the start of Season 4. From that moment on, everything about his behavior was a performance. The shyness, the eagerness to please, the way he never caused trouble and always followed Benson's orders. All of it was an act designed to make everyone trust him so he could carry out his mission without anyone getting suspicious. And it worked. For 2 entire seasons, nobody questioned Thomas. He was just the intern, the new guy, the kid who was too polite and too boring to pay attention to. Muscleman pushed him around, Mordecai and Rigby barely noticed him, and Benson liked him because he actually did his job without complaining. Thomas played his role perfectly. But he was not working alone. Thomas had a partner, a fellow Russian spy named Natalia. And this is where things get really clever. In the real Thomas, Benson tells the park crew that he has a new girlfriend named Natalie, and he wants to show her around the park. At the exact same time, Rigby starts getting suspicious about Thomas. He notices things that do not add up and starts accusing Thomas of being a spy. But nobody believes him. Mordecai, Muscleman, and High Five Ghost all think Rigby is being paranoid and ridiculous. It is classic Rigby. He is always overreacting about something, so why would this time be any different? But then Mordecai, Muscleman, High Five Ghost, and Rigby stumble upon a knocked-out CIA agent in the park, and suddenly Rigby's crazy theory does not seem so crazy anymore. They start investigating, and the truth comes crashing down. Natalie, Benson's new girlfriend, is actually Natalia, a Russian spy working with Thomas. The two of them have been secretly installing rockets under the park this entire time, preparing to launch the entire piece of land across the ocean to Russia. When Thomas's cover is blown, the episode does something brilliant. It goes back and shows flashbacks to previous episodes where Thomas appeared in the background and reframes them through the lens of his spy mission. All those moments where he seemed like he was just standing around doing nothing, he was actually carrying out phases of the plan. Episodes like Exit 9B, Pie Contest, The Christmas Special, Thomas Fights Back, Journey to the Bottom of the Crash Pit, and the Thanksgiving Special are all revisited, and we see what Thomas was really doing during those episodes. Every moment has a new meaning. Even the Thanksgiving episode where Thomas brought his mother to the park gets reframed. His mother was not real. She was actually a robot with an Italian accent that Thomas was controlling remotely through his pizza costume. The show had been hiding clues in plain sight for years. Here is an interesting behind-the-scenes detail. The writers of Regular Show did not originally plan for Thomas to be a spy. When they first created the character, he was meant to be exactly what he appeared to be, just a regular intern. But fans online started complaining that Thomas had no personality and no development, wondering what the point of his character even was. The writers saw these complaints and came up with the spy twist as a way to give Thomas a purpose that retroactively justified his entire existence on the show. It was a genius move because it turned the character's biggest weakness, his blandness, into his greatest strength. He was bland because he was supposed to be. That was the disguise. Now here is where the episode takes a serious turn. With the plan exposed, Natalia decides to go ahead with the launch. But there is a change. The original plan was to take the park to Russia. Natalia's revised plan is much worse. Instead of just stealing the park, Russia is going to fire the land directly at Russian missiles. According to the episode, there was a treaty preventing Russia from firing nuclear missiles at the United States. So the workaround was to fire pieces of American soil at Russian missiles instead, technically not breaking the treaty while still causing massive destruction. The park and everyone on it would be destroyed. This is the moment where Thomas has to make a choice. He has spent his whole life being trained to serve Russia. His entire identity was built around loyalty to his home country. But over the past 2 seasons, something happened that his training never prepared him for. He made friends. Real friends. Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Skips, Muscleman, High Five Ghost, even Pops. These people treated him like family. They included him in everything. They cared about him. And now Natalia's plan would kill all of them. Thomas chose his friends. He turned against Natalia and sabotaged the mission. The rockets had already launched, and the park was flying over the Pacific Ocean. But Thomas managed to turn the entire piece of land around and bring it back. Natalia tried to stop him, but during the struggle, she fell out of a helicopter and was eaten by a whale. The park crew was saved, and the mission was a failure. But there was a cost. Thomas had now betrayed Russia by sabotaging their operation. And he had also committed treason against the United States, because he had been operating as a foreign spy on American soil. Both countries wanted him. He was a wanted man on 2 continents. After everything settles down, Benson offers Thomas his job back at the park. He tells him he can stay, but Thomas knows he cannot. If he stays, both the American and Russian governments will find him, and that will put everyone at the park in danger. He has to disappear. The farewell scene is one of the most emotional moments in the entire series. Thomas stands in front of the park crew, the people who became his first and only real friends, and thanks them. He tells them that they were the best friends he ever had. The park crew watches him leave, and as he walks away, Rigby says something that hits harder than any joke or punchline the show ever delivered. He says, "You'll always be Thomas to us." It does not matter that his real name is Nikolai. It does not matter that he was sent there to betray them. To the park crew, he will always be Thomas, their friend. Thomas made one more major appearance in the Season 7 episode, Guys Night 2. In this one, Thomas secretly comes back to visit his friends one last time before going into hiding for good. The gang has one final night together, hanging out and having fun like the old days. But Thomas is being tracked. Agents discover his location at a wing restaurant, and Thomas has to use his spy training to fight them off and escape. The episode shows just how skilled Thomas actually is when he is not pretending to be a meek intern. He takes down multiple agents using hand-to-hand combat and driving techniques that none of the park crew ever knew he was capable of. At the end of the episode, Thomas reveals that his escape route is a submarine waiting for him offshore. He says his final goodbye to the group and disappears, this time for real. The last time we ever see Thomas in the series is during the Season 7 finale, Rigby's graduation day special. When the park is launched into space by the Dome experiment, there is a brief shot of Thomas sitting on top of a Russian submarine, watching his friends fly away into the sky. He raises his drink and silently wishes them well. It is a small moment, but it says everything. Even from a distance, even as a fugitive with no country to call home, Thomas is still watching out for the people he loved. The writers later confirmed through supplementary material that after leaving the group, Thomas fled to Canada. He ended up in Montreal, where he opened a video store that only rents out spy movies. It is the most Thomas thing imaginable. Even in hiding, even after everything he went through, the guy found a way to be both mundane and connected to his past at the same time. What makes the real Thomas arc so special is that it is a story about identity and belonging. Thomas was raised to be a weapon. He was told his whole life that his purpose was to serve his country, that loyalty to Russia was the only thing that mattered. But when he actually experienced friendship, when he felt what it was like to have people who cared about him not because he was useful, but because they genuinely liked him, everything changed. He threw away his mission, his country, and his entire identity because the bonds he formed at the park were worth more than anything he had been taught to believe in. Thomas's story also proved that regular show could pull off long-term storytelling in a way that nobody expected. A character who seemed pointless for 2 years turned out to be one of the most important and emotionally resonant parts of the entire show. That is the kind of writing that separates good shows from great ones. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Thomas was not the only park member going through a major transformation during this era. Because while the spy drama was unfolding, Muscleman was quietly preparing for the biggest moment of his life. And it would change the dynamic of the entire group forever. Section 8. Muscleman's Journey. From My Mom to Marriage. If someone told you at the start of regular show that the loud, green, shirtless guy who could not stop making terrible "my mom" jokes would end up having one of the most complete and emotionally satisfying character arcs on the entire show, you probably would not have believed them. Muscleman was annoying. That was kind of his whole thing in the beginning. He was the coworker that nobody wanted to deal with, the guy who pulled pranks on everyone, who laughed at his own jokes when nobody else did, and who seemed to exist solely to make Mordecai and Rigby's lives harder than they needed to be. But regular show had a way of turning its simplest characters into its deepest ones, and Muscleman might be the single best example of that. Mitchell Muscleman Sorenstein is a stocky, green-skinned man who works as a groundskeeper at the park alongside everyone else. His best friend is High Five Ghost, a small ghost with a hand sticking out of the top of his head. The two of them are inseparable. They hang out together, they pull pranks together, and they have each other's backs no matter what. In the early seasons, Muscleman and High Five Ghost mostly served as rivals to Mordecai and Rigby. They would compete over stupid things, mess with each other, and generally get on each other's nerves. Muscleman's signature move was his "my mom" joke, which was his version of a "your mom" joke, except he always accidentally made it about his own mother instead. He would say something like, "You know who else likes to grill burgers? My mom!" and then laugh hysterically while everyone around him just stared in silence. But even in those early seasons, there was one thing about Muscleman that separated him from being just a one-note comedy character. He had Starla. Starla is Muscleman's girlfriend, and later his wife, and she is essentially the female version of him. She is loud, she is intense, she is not conventionally attractive by the show's standards, and she matches Muscleman's energy in every possible way. When the show first introduced their relationship, it was mostly played for laughs. The joke was that these two gross, over-the-top people found each other and were somehow perfect together. But as the seasons went on, the show stopped treating their relationship as a joke and started treating it as the real thing. Because it was. One of the first episodes to really show the depth of Muscleman's feelings was The Longest Weekend from Season 3. In this episode, Muscleman and Starla are told by a relationship expert that they need to spend an entire weekend apart to prove that their relationship is healthy and not just codependent. Muscleman completely falls apart without her. He cannot function. He is miserable, he is desperate, and he does everything he can to resist the urge to call her or go see her. Meanwhile, Starla is going through the exact same thing on her end. The episode is funny, but it also shows that these two are not just together out of convenience. They genuinely cannot stand being apart. Their love is real, even if it looks strange from the outside. Season 3 also gave us the episode Fancy Restaurant, which was one of the first times the show used Muscleman's relationship with Starla to tell a story with real emotional stakes. Muscleman has dinner plans with Starla and her parents at a fancy restaurant, and he is terrified because he knows he does not have the manners to pull it off. Mordecai and Rigby help him prepare, teaching him how to dress properly, how to use silverware, and how to speak without being crude. The whole thing plays out like a comedy version of My Fair Lady, with Muscleman trying desperately to be something he is not so that Starla's family will accept him. What makes this episode work is that underneath all the humor, it is really about a guy who loves a girl so much that he is willing to change everything about himself just to make her happy. That is not a joke. That is devotion. But the episode that truly changed how the audience saw Muscleman was Trucker Hall of Fame in Season 4. As we talked about earlier, this is the episode where Muscleman finds out that his father, Muscle Dad, has died in a bear mauling. His father was a trucker, and his last wish was for his trucker hat ashes to be spread at the Trucker Hall of Fame. Muscleman goes on a road trip with Mordecai and Rigby to honor that wish, and the episode strips away everything comedic about his character to show the broken person underneath. This is a guy who just lost his dad. He is grieving. He is trying to hold it together because he has a mission to complete. And when he finally reaches the Trucker Hall of Fame and spreads the ashes, there is nothing funny about it at all. It is just sad and beautiful and real. From this episode forward, the audience knew that Muscleman was more than his jokes. The show continued to develop Muscleman throughout seasons 4 and 5, showing different sides of him. We saw his loyalty to his friends, his insecurity about how people see him, and his ongoing commitment to Starla. Muscleman was not just growing as a character, he was growing as a person. And by the time Season 6 rolled around, the show was ready to take his story to the next level. The End of Muscleman is a Season 6 episode that pulled off one of the best fake-outs in the entire series. The episode begins with Muscleman telling the park crew that he is leaving this world tonight. Everyone immediately assumes the worst. They think Muscleman is dying. The entire group goes into panic mode. Benson is devastated. Mordecai and Rigby are in shock. Even Skip seems shaken. Muscleman, seemingly accepting his fate, starts going through a bucket list of things he wants to do before the end. He wants to eat all his favorite foods. He wants to pull his greatest pranks. He wants to spend time with the people who matter most to him. The park crew rallies around him, helping him check off every item on the list, and the whole thing is played with a weight and sadness that makes you genuinely believe this is the end for Muscleman. But it is not. Because leaving this world tonight was not a death sentence. It was a wedding metaphor. A terrible, confusing, incredibly Muscleman wedding metaphor. What he actually meant was that he was going to propose to Starla that night. He was leaving his old life behind and starting a new one as an engaged man. When the truth comes out, the reactions from the park crew are priceless. Benson is furious. He cannot believe that Muscleman put everyone through that emotional roller coaster just because he could not phrase things properly. Benson tells Muscleman that "I leave this world tonight" is absolutely not a wedding metaphor, and that Muscleman owes him $12,000 after splurging most of his money on the bucket list. But underneath the anger, there is relief. Muscleman is not dying, he is getting married. And despite everything, the park crew is happy for him. The actual proposal to Starla is sweet and genuine. Muscleman gets down on one knee and asks the love of his life to marry him, and she says yes. After seasons of building this relationship, of showing us the fights and the makeups and the moments of tenderness hidden beneath the crude humor, Muscleman and Starla are going to get married. It felt earned. These two had been through everything together, and now they were making it official. The wedding itself takes place in the Season 6 finale, Dumped at the Altar. This is a massive episode that serves as a turning point for the entire show, and while it is technically supposed to be about Muscleman and Starla's big day, a lot of other things happen at the same time. Mordecai's love triangle with CJ and Margaret explodes during the ceremony, which we covered in detail in the CJ section. But at the heart of the episode, this is still Muscleman's story. The wedding hits a major snag early on when Muscleman cannot find something incredibly important. His father had left him a letter containing a life lesson, something meaningful that Muscle Dad wanted to pass down to his son for this exact moment. But the letter is missing, and Muscleman is falling apart. This is supposed to be the happiest day of his life, and the one thing connecting him to his late father is gone. The park crew scrambles to help him find it, all while dealing with the chaos of Mordecai's romantic meltdown happening at the same time. Eventually, through a series of challenges and setbacks, the letter is found and the wedding goes forward. Muscleman and Starla get married in front of all their friends and co-workers, and despite all the drama that surrounded the event, the ceremony itself is a beautiful moment. These two people, who the show originally presented as a punchline, have now had one of the most emotional weddings in the entire series. Muscleman went from being the guy nobody took seriously to the first member of the park crew to get married. He beat Mordecai to the altar. He beat Skips, who has been alive for centuries. He beat Benson, who has been searching for love his entire life. The loudest, crudest, most obnoxious member of the group was the first one to figure out what really matters and commit to it completely. High Five Ghost's story also developed alongside Muscleman's during this era, though it was more subtle. High Five Ghost, or Fives as his friends call him, had a love interest of his own named Celia. She was a ghost like him, and the two of them had a genuine connection. Celia went away to study in Prague for 4 years, but their relationship survived the distance. High Five Ghost was always the quieter half of the Muscleman and Fives duo, but the show gave him enough moments to feel like a real, fully formed character with his own emotional life. What makes Muscleman's overall arc so satisfying is the contrast between where he started and where he ended up. In Season 1, he was a nuisance, a walking joke machine with no depth and no purpose beyond making everyone around him uncomfortable. By Season 6, he was a husband, a grieving son who had honored his father's memory, a loyal friend who fought beside the park crew in every crisis, and a man who had found the one person in the world who understood him completely. The show did not change who Muscleman was at his core. He was still loud, still crude, still obsessed with pranks and my mom jokes. But it showed that those things were just the surface, and that underneath it all, there was a guy with a huge heart who cared deeply about the people in his life. In the series finale epilogue, set 25 years after the events of the show, Muscleman and Starla are shown with 6 children, all of whom inherited their father's personality and habits. It is the perfect ending for a character whose whole journey was about finding love, holding on to it, and building a life that nobody expected him to be capable of. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Muscleman was settling into married life, someone else at the park was just beginning to grow up. Rigby, the most immature member of the group, was about to face the one challenge he had been running from his entire life, and a certain mole named Eileen was going to be the reason he finally stopped running. Section 9, Rigby Grows Up, The Diploma Arc, and Eileen, Seasons 5 to 7. If there is one character on regular show who you would never expect to have one of the most inspiring growth arcs in the entire series, it is Rigby. This is the guy who could not be bothered to do anything. He did not want to work. He did not want to take responsibility. He did not want to follow rules. He was lazy, he was immature, he was impulsive, and he had the attention span of a goldfish. For the first few seasons of the show, Rigby existed almost entirely as a source of chaos. He was the one who started problems, the one who dragged Mordecai into bad decisions, and the one who Benson most wanted to fire on any given day. He was terrible at arm wrestling, terrible at punchies, and even Pops, the sweetest and gentlest person at the park, could beat him in a fight. Rigby was, by almost every measurable standard, the least capable person in the group. But regular show believed in Rigby, even when Rigby did not believe in himself. And the arc that proved it, the storyline that took this lazy little raccoon and turned him into one of the most fully developed characters in animated television, started with one simple, embarrassing fact. Rigby never finished high school. This was first revealed in the Season 2 episode, More Smarter. In this episode, Mordecai starts making fun of Rigby for not having a high school diploma. He teases him about it, pokes at him, and generally makes Rigby feel terrible about it. Rigby, being Rigby, does not respond by going back to school or studying harder. Instead, he drinks a chemical that is supposed to make him smarter. It works, but it works too well. Both Mordecai and Rigby end up becoming so intelligent that they can no longer communicate with anyone around them. They start speaking in what sounds like Latin to everyone else, and eventually they realize that being so smart that you cannot connect with the people around you is pointless. They reverse the effects and go back to normal, and the diploma issue gets dropped. For the time being. But the show did not forget about it. That one detail, Rigby being a high school dropout, became a thread that the writers would pull on again and again over the course of several seasons. It was not just a joke. It was the symbol of everything Rigby was afraid of. Rigby dropped out because he did not believe he was smart enough. He did not believe he was capable enough. Deep down, underneath all the bravado and the loudness and the constant need to prove himself through stupid competitions and pranks, Rigby was insecure. He was afraid of trying and failing, so he chose not to try at all. And for years, that fear defined him. What makes Rigby's growth arc so effective is that the show did not rush it. They let it breathe. They let Rigby be immature for a long time, sometimes frustratingly so. In seasons 3 through 5, Rigby's worst qualities were often on full display. He was selfish, he was reckless, and he had a habit of making situations worse for everyone around him. There were episodes where his behavior crossed the line from funny to genuinely hurtful, and the show did not always let him off the hook for it. He faced consequences. He got punished. Benson came close to actually firing him on multiple occasions. And through it all, the diploma sat there in the background like a reminder of the one thing Rigby was too scared to face. The thing that finally started to change Rigby was not a supernatural adventure or a near-death experience. It was a person, a quiet, kind, bespectacled mole named Eileen Roberts. Eileen first appeared alongside Margaret at the coffee shop, where she also worked as a waitress. In the early seasons, Eileen had an obvious crush on Rigby, and he wanted nothing to do with it. He found her annoying. He avoided her. He was dismissive and sometimes outright rude to her. Meanwhile, Eileen was patient, smart, and genuinely sweet. She never pushed too hard. She was just there, consistently kind, consistently present, and consistently interested in Rigby, even when he gave her absolutely no reason to be. Over time, Rigby's attitude toward Eileen started to shift. It was not a sudden change. There was no big dramatic moment where Rigby woke up one day and realized he had feelings for her. It was gradual, which made it feel real. He started being less dismissive. He started noticing her. He started enjoying her company. And by the time season 5 and 6 rolled around, Rigby and Eileen were spending real time together, hanging out not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They started dating a couple of months before Muscleman's wedding, making it official in a quiet way that suited both of their personalities. What Eileen brought to Rigby's life was stability. She did not try to change him or fix him. She just believed in him. She saw potential in Rigby that he could not see in himself, and her presence in his life gave him the confidence to start actually reaching for it. Eileen was the first person who made Rigby feel like he was worth something beyond being the funny guy who messed everything up. And that belief is what eventually pushed him to do the one thing he had been avoiding his entire adult life: go back to high school. In season 7, Rigby makes the decision to return to high school and earn his diploma. This is a massive deal for his character. This is the guy who ran away from every challenge, who took shortcuts at every opportunity, who literally drank a chemical to avoid having to study. And now he is willingly going back to the place that represents his greatest failure and his deepest insecurity. The fact that he does it at all is a triumph. The fact that he sticks with it is a miracle. The diploma arc runs through a significant portion of Season 7, and it is handled beautifully. Rigby goes back to class. He sits with students who are much younger than him. He studies. He struggles. He does the work. It is not easy for him, and the show does not pretend it is. There are moments of frustration and doubt, moments where the old Rigby wants to quit and go back to being comfortable in his mediocrity. But he pushes through, and the reason he pushes through is because he finally has something worth pushing for. He has Eileen. He has his friends. He has the knowledge that he is capable of more than everyone, including himself, always assumed. The Season 7 finale, Rigby's Graduation Day Special, is the culmination of this entire arc. Rigby is about to graduate from high school. He has done it. After years of being the dropout, the slacker, the guy who could not commit to anything, Rigby is about to walk across a stage and receive his diploma. On top of that, he has been selected to appear on a television show called Inspire America to talk about his journey. His story of going back to school as an adult and finishing what he started is exactly the kind of thing that inspires people. And the fact that Rigby, of all people, is being held up as an example of perseverance is both hilarious and genuinely moving. The graduation itself is a celebration. The park crew is there. Eileen is there. It is one of those rare moments on the show where everything feels right. Rigby has earned this. After 7 seasons of watching him be the worst version of himself, we finally get to see him be the best version, and it feels incredible. But this is regular show, so of course the celebration does not last. Because the graduation day party is planned to take place at the park, and that is where things go sideways. Throughout Season 7, there had been a mysterious dome placed over the park by a group of scientists. It was part of something called the Dome Experiment, and nobody really understood what it was about. In the finale, Benson gets a message saying that to end the experiment, everyone needs to push a button, the same button that had appeared in an earlier episode. It seems simple enough, but pushing it has consequences that nobody anticipated. As Rigby's graduation guests are walking toward the park for the party, Benson, Mordecai, Rigby, Pops, Skips, High Five Ghost, and Muscleman all push the button together. Immediately, the dome seals shut, and the entire park begins to lift off the ground. The park is rising into the air. Everyone outside the dome watches in shock as this piece of land, complete with the house, the trees, and everything on it, flies straight up into the sky. Mordecai's parents are watching from below. CJ is watching. Mr. Mellard is watching. Thomas, sitting on top of his Russian submarine far away, is watching. And they can do nothing but stare as the park disappears into the atmosphere. Eileen, who was inside the park house making a banana souffle at the time, comes outside to find that she is now in space. The souffle deflates from the shock. Everyone inside the dome is stunned. They are trapped. They are off the planet. And there is no obvious way home. Rigby's greatest triumph and his biggest nightmare happened on the same day. He finally got his diploma. Finally proved to himself and everyone else that he was more than a dropout and a slacker, and then immediately got launched into space with no way back. It is the most regular show thing that could possibly happen. The universe gives you a win with one hand and pulls the rug out with the other. But there is something beautiful about the fact that when everything went wrong, Rigby was not alone. Eileen was there with him. The girl who believed in him when nobody else did. The girl who gave him a reason to try. Was right there beside him as they flew into the unknown. Whatever was coming next, they were going to face it together. Rigby's arc from dropout to graduate is one of the most underrated storylines in animated television. It is not flashy. There are no big battles or supernatural twists involved. It is just a guy who was scared, who had given up on himself, slowly finding the courage to try again. And that might be the most relatable story regular show ever told. Not everyone has fought a giant floating head or traveled through time or battled an army of returned villains. But almost everyone knows what it feels like to be afraid of failing. And almost everyone knows how much it means when someone believes in you enough to make you believe in yourself. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Rigby's graduation was just the beginning of a much bigger story. Because now the entire park crew was trapped in space with no way home, and the final chapter of regular show was about to begin with a season that would change everything we thought we knew about the show, starting with the biggest secret of all, the true origin of Pops. Section 10, The Dome, The Launch, and Regular Show in Space, Seasons 7 to 8. When the park launched into space at the end of Season 7, everything about regular show changed. For 7 seasons, the show had been grounded in one location. The park was the center of everything. It was where the characters worked, where they lived, where every single adventure started and ended. No matter how wild things got, no matter how far into the supernatural the episodes went, the park was always there waiting for them when it was over. It was home. And now it was floating through outer space, sealed inside a dome, with no way back to Earth. Season 8 of Regular Show carried a new subtitle. It was officially called Regular Show in Space. And that title was not just for fun. The entire final season took place off the planet. Every single episode. The park crew was stuck up there, and the show fully committed to that premise in a way that nobody expected. This was no longer a comedy about two slackers avoiding work at a local park. This was a science fiction story about a group of friends trapped in space, trying to survive, and slowly uncovering a secret about one of their own that would determine the fate of the entire universe. But before we get to that secret, we need to talk about what happened immediately after the launch. When the dome sealed and the park flew into orbit, the people trapped inside were Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Pops, Skips, Muscleman, High Five Ghost, and Eileen. Eileen was not originally supposed to be there. She just happened to be inside the park house at the time, making a banana souffle when the launch happened. She walked outside to find herself in space, and the souffle deflated right in front of her. It was a small, funny detail, but it also meant that Eileen was now part of the main crew for the rest of the series. She had been a supporting character for years, mostly showing up at the coffee shop or hanging around during group outings. But from this point forward, she was a full member of the team, and the show treated her that way. The park crew did not stay floating aimlessly for long. Shortly after the launch, they were found by a group of strangers who arrived in a spacecraft. These newcomers introduced themselves as Toothpick Sally, Chance Sureshot, and Recap Robot. They were members of a larger organization, and when Benson asked if they were going to take the group home, the answer was no. Instead, they brought the park crew to a massive space station called the Space Tree. The Space Tree was unlike anything the show had ever introduced before. It was a giant station filled with all kinds of alien species and spacefaring characters, commanded by a figure named Colonel Rawls. The Space Tree had its own rules, its own culture, and its own problems. For the park crew, it was supposed to be their new home until they could figure out a way to get back to Earth. But adjusting to life in space was not easy for everyone. Benson had the hardest time with the transition, and honestly, that makes complete sense for his character. Benson is a guy who needs control. He needs structure. He needs things to make sense and follow a plan. And being trapped in space with no way home, surrounded by aliens and spaceships and things he could not possibly have prepared for, was his worst nightmare. While everyone else in the group started to adapt and even get excited about their new situation, Benson dug his heels in and refused to accept it. He did not want to be in space. He wanted to go home. He wanted to be back at the park, doing his job, managing his employees, and living his normal life. The more Benson's complaints went unheard, the more frustrated he became. His friends told him that being in space was exciting. Colonel Rawls did not take his concerns seriously. Nobody seemed to understand that Benson was not just being difficult. He was scared. He was out of his element in the most extreme way possible, and he did not know how to handle it. Eventually, Benson decided he had had enough. He was going to leave. He found what he believed was an escape pod and stepped inside, ready to fly back to Earth on his own. But the escape pod was not actually an escape pod. It was a hologram simulator. And what it showed Benson was a simulation of what his life would look like if he actually left the group and went back to Earth alone. The simulation was miserable. Without his friends, without the people he had spent years yelling at and worrying about and secretly caring for, Benson's life was empty. The simulator showed him that the park crew was not just a group of annoying employees, they were his family. And leaving them behind, even to go back to the place he called home, would be the worst decision he could ever make. Benson came out of the simulator with a different perspective. He stopped trying to leave. He stopped complaining. He accepted that this was where he needed to be, not because space was great, but because these people were his people. Wherever they were, that was home. It was a quiet but powerful moment of growth for a character who had spent the entire series hiding behind anger and control. Life on the Space Tree brought new dynamics to the group. Muscleman, always the prankster, quickly found new targets for his antics. He got enlisted in pranking Colonel Rawls' rival, Carlton Tanner from the Space Bush, dragging the crew into space-based versions of the same kind of nonsense they used to get into back on Earth. In many ways, the show was saying that no matter where these characters go, no matter how far from home they are still the same people. Mordecai and Rigby still slack off. Muscleman still pulls pranks. Benson still gets angry. Skip still fixes things. The setting changed, but the characters did not. And that consistency is what kept the show feeling like regular show, even when it looked completely different. The space tree also introduced new threats and new allies. The crew encountered various alien species, dealt with space-related problems, and found themselves pulled into conflicts that were much larger than anything they had dealt with back on Earth. The science fiction elements that the show had always played with in small doses were now front and center, and the writers embraced them fully. Season 8 had space battles, alien civilizations, and cosmic stakes that made the old days of fighting haunted arcade machines feel like a lifetime ago. But the real heart of Season 8, the thing that everything was building toward, was the slow and shocking revelation about Pops. For 7 seasons, Pops had been the sweet, innocent, lollipop-shaped man who owned the park and found joy in the simplest things. He was the guy who clapped his hands when he saw butterflies. He was the guy who gave lollipops instead of money because he did not understand how currency worked. He was naive, he was gentle, and he was loved by everyone at the park. Nobody ever questioned where Pops came from or why he was the way he was. He was just Pops. That was enough. But Season 8 started pulling at that thread, and what it revealed underneath changed everything. As the season progressed, strange things started happening around Pops. He began experiencing visions. He started displaying abilities that nobody knew he had, and people from across the galaxy started taking an interest in him. Not as the funny lollipop man from the park, but as someone of enormous cosmic importance. The wider galaxy knew something about Pops that the park crew did not. They called him the Chosen One. They called him the embodiment of pure good. And they were terrified of what was coming for him. Because something was coming. Or rather, someone. Throughout Season 8, a figure known as Anti-Pops began making his presence known. Anti-Pops was hunting Pops. He sent agents after him. He hired a nightmare alien named Carl to track Pops down in his dreams in the episode The Dream Warrior. Carl managed to find the park crew's location, which allowed Anti-Pops and his army to attack the space tree directly. The show made it clear that Anti-Pops was not just another villain of the week. He was something far more dangerous. The galaxy-wide resistance that had formed to protect Pops referred to Anti-Pops by a terrifying name. They called him He Who Will Erase Us. One of the most important episodes in this build-up was Kill 'Em with Kindness. In this episode, Pops and Anti-Pops had their first meeting through a telepathic connection. Pops, being Pops, offered to make peace. He suggested they become friends. He invited Anti-Pops to meet at an arcade to talk things out. But when Pops arrived, it was a trap. Anti-Pops tried to kill him. Pops tried to reason with his attacker, tried to talk to him, tried to find some good in him, but it was useless. Anti-Pops was pure destruction. During the fight, Pops' teacher Earl, who had been helping him understand his powers, was killed by Anti-Pops while protecting Pops. The park crew arrived just in time to save Pops and escape, but Earl's death was a devastating blow. It proved that Anti-Pops was not going to be reasoned with. He was not going to stop, and people were going to die. As Season 8 moved toward its conclusion, the pieces started coming together. The park crew learned bits and pieces about Pop's true nature. They learned that he was connected to something ancient, something that went far beyond a lollipop man working at a park. They learned that Anti-Pops was not just a random enemy. He was connected to Pops in a way that nobody could have predicted. And they learned that the fate of the entire universe, not just the park, not just the space tree, but everything that exists, depended on what happened next. The crew had faced a lot of threats over 8 seasons. They had fought monsters, ghosts, demons, and an army of resurrected villains. But nothing had ever been this big. Nothing had ever felt this final. The park crew was no longer fighting to save their jobs or fix a mistake or survive another week. They were fighting for the survival of all of existence. And the key to everything was the sweetest, most innocent character the show had ever created. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The full truth about who Pops really was and where he came from would be revealed on a distant planet called Lollyland. And when the park crew finally learned the whole story, when they understood what Pops truly was and what he had been carrying inside him for longer than any of them could imagine, it changed the meaning of everything they had ever experienced. Together. Section 11. The Chosen One. Pop's true origin and the battle for the universe. For 7 seasons, Pops was the joke. Not in a mean way, everyone loved Pops. But he was the character you laughed at because of how out of touch he was with the world around him. He paid for things with lollipops instead of money. He clapped his hands and giggled at things that no adult should find exciting. He spoke in this overly formal, old-fashioned way that made everything he said sound like it was coming from a Victorian gentleman who had accidentally wandered into the 21st century. He was sweet, he was innocent, and he was completely clueless about almost everything. For most of the show's run, that was all there was to Pops. The kind, silly lollipop man who brought joy to every scene he was in. But regular show had been hiding something about Pops from the very beginning. And when Season 8 finally pulled back the curtain and showed us who Pops really was, it did not just change the way we looked at the final season. It changed the way we looked at the entire show. Pops was not from Earth. He was not a human with a funny-shaped head. He was not even Mr. Mellard's biological son. Pops was born on a distant planet called Lollyland, and his real name was Megacranus. On Lollyland, Megacranus was considered the highest state of being that the planet's species could produce. He was, in the simplest terms possible, the embodiment of pure good. Everything kind, everything gentle, everything loving about the universe was concentrated into this one being. That is why Pops was the way he was. His innocence was not stupidity. His kindness was not naivety. It was his nature. He was literally made of goodness. But the universe operates on balance, and when something purely good is created, something purely evil has to exist to match it. When Pops was born as Megacranus, the universe simultaneously created his opposite, his twin brother, a being called Malum Cranus, the embodiment of pure evil, the destroyer, the one who would come to be known as Anti-Pops. Anti-Pops looked like a dark mirror of Pops. Where Pops was pale and gentle, Anti-Pops was dark and terrifying. He had white glowing eyes, sharp white teeth, a long beard, and dark armor with a large spiked cape. He radiated power and destruction in the same way that Pops radiated warmth and joy. And from the moment they were both brought into existence, they were locked in a cycle that had been repeating for longer than anyone could count. Here is the part that changes everything. Pops and Anti-Pops have been fighting each other for billions of years. Not just this version of them. Every version. Because every time the two brothers fight and their powers collide, the resulting clash is so massive that it resets the entire universe. Everything gets wiped clean. Every planet, every star, every living being. All of it gets erased and starts over from scratch. And when the universe restarts, Pops and Anti-Pops are born again. And the whole cycle repeats. They grow up, they find each other, they fight, and the universe resets. Over and over and over. Billions of times. An infinite loop with no end and no escape. Nobody remembers the previous cycles. When the universe resets, everything starts fresh. The same events play out. The same people are born. The same friendships form. And eventually, the same battle happens. It is like watching the same movie on repeat forever, except nobody in the movie knows they have already done this before. This means that the park crew, Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Skips, Muscleman, High Five Ghost, all of them have existed in previous cycles of the universe. They have lived before. They have fought alongside Pops before. They just do not remember any of it. The ancient tapestries on Lollyland showed previous versions of the park crew standing with Pops in battles that happened billions of years ago. Different faces, different lives, but the same souls showing up to fight the same fight, over and over, across infinite resets. Mr. Mellard was revealed to be Pops' adoptive father. He was not his biological parent. He and his wife had taken Pops in and cared for him since the early 1900s. The show had previously established in Skips vs. Technology that Pops was born sometime between 1879 and 1910. But with the Season 8 revelations, it became clear that those dates only applied to this particular cycle of the universe. In truth, Pops was as old as existence itself, maybe even older since the universe had been resetting around him for as long as anyone could trace. This also explains something that the show had never addressed directly. Why was Mr. Mellard so protective of Pops? Why did he keep him sheltered? Why did Pops seem like someone who had been locked away from the world for most of his life? It was because Mr. Mellard knew the truth, or at least part of it. He knew that Pops was special, that he was in danger, and that someday, something terrible was going to come for him. So he kept Pops safe, hidden in the park, surrounded by people who would look out for him. The park was not just a workplace, it was a fortress, a hiding place for the most important being in the universe. And the danger did come. Anti-Pops spent Season 8 hunting Pops across the galaxy. He built an army. He set up a space station as his headquarters. He hired bounty hunters and sent them after the park crew. He even did petty things in his downtime, like leaving bad reviews and one-star ratings on online food websites for restaurants he had never even visited. That detail, thrown in by the writers, was such a perfect regular show touch. Even the embodiment of pure evil has weirdly mundane habits. Anti-Pop's goal was different this time around. In every previous cycle, he and Pops had fought to a stalemate, resulting in the universal reset. But Anti-Pops was tired of the cycle. He did not want another reset. He wanted to find Pops and kill him before the final battle could happen. If he could destroy Pops early, before Pops unlocked his full power, then Anti-Pops could break the cycle and destroy the universe for good. No reset, no new beginning, just permanent, total destruction. The wider galaxy knew about this threat. They had learned about Anti-Pops and his plans, and a resistance movement had formed specifically to protect Pops. These were the people who called Anti-Pops "He who will erase us." They understood what was at stake. If Anti-Pops succeeded, everything would end. Not just life on one planet, everything. Every star, every galaxy, every dimension. All of it, gone forever. As Season 8 progressed, Pops began to change. The sweet, oblivious lollipop man started to understand what he was. He started tapping into abilities he never knew he had. He was stronger than anyone realized. During the nightmare alien Carl's attack, Pops actually fought back and defeated Carl in his own dream. The park crew watched as the person they had always seen as the most helpless member of the group started to become something else entirely. Pops was still kind. He was still gentle. He still found joy in simple things. But now there was a power behind that kindness that was almost frightening in its scale. The park crew also started to understand their role in all of this. They were not just Pop's co-workers. They were not just his friends. They were his protectors. In every cycle of the universe, versions of them had stood beside Pops and fought for him. This was their purpose. This was why they were all drawn together at the park in the first place. The friendships they had built over 8 seasons were not random. They were part of something much bigger than any of them had ever imagined. Earl, Pops' teacher who had been helping him understand and control his powers, tried to prepare him for what was coming. Earl knew the history. He knew about the cycles, about the resets, about the endless war between the two brothers. He trained Pops and guided him, and did everything he could to give Pops a chance in the fight to come. But when Anti-Pops tracked them down and attacked, Earl gave his life to protect Pops. His death was one of the most devastating moments in Season 8 because it proved that the stakes were real. People were dying. The final battle was coming whether anyone was ready for it or not. By the end of Season 8, the park crew had learned the full truth. Pops was the chosen one. He was born to fight Anti-Pops. The universe depended on the outcome. Every previous battle had ended in a draw and a reset, and if this one ended the same way, everything would just start over again. The same lives, the same friendships, the same pain, repeated for eternity with nobody ever knowing. But this time was different. This time, Mordecai and Rigby were involved. And for the first time in billions of years of universal history, someone was going to try something that had never been tried before. The park crew was not just going to fight alongside Pops, they were going to change the outcome. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The final destination was Lollyland, the planet where Pops was born. The planet where it all started. And on that planet, in the place where Mega Cranus and Malum Cranus first came into existence, the last battle for the fate of everything was about to begin. Section 12. A regular epic final battle. Sacrifice, epilogue, and jolly good show. This is it. The final chapter. After 8 seasons, 244 episodes, and 7 years of television, regular show came down to one moment. One battle. One choice. Everything the show had ever built, every friendship, every joke, every heartbreak, every supernatural disaster that started with something as simple as setting up chairs or buying concert tickets, all of it was leading here, to a planet called Lollyland, to 2 brothers who had been fighting since the beginning of time, and to a group of park workers who were never supposed to matter, but ended up meaning everything. A regular epic final battle aired on January 16, 2017. It was a 3-part finale, with each part running 11 minutes. 1.33 million viewers watched the first part, and 1.37 million watched parts 2 and 3, making it the most viewed episode of the entire 8th season. And it earned every single one of those viewers, because this finale did something that very few cartoon endings have ever managed to do. It was satisfying, it was emotional, it was surprising, and it respected everything that came before it. The episode begins with Pops having a nightmare about his upcoming fight with Anti-Pops. He is scared. For all his power, for everything he has learned about who he really is, Pops is still Pops at his core. He does not want to fight. He does not want to hurt anyone. He is the embodiment of pure good, and violence goes against every fiber of his being. Mordecai and Rigby find him and comfort him, reminding him that he is not alone. They are with him. Everyone is with him. The park crew arrives on Lollyland shortly after. It is the planet where Pops was born as Mega Cranus, the planet where his twin brother Malum Cranus was created as his opposite. On Lollyland, the crew meets a group of natives, including characters named Frivola Cranus, Quadravi Cranus, and a being simply known as Weird Mushroom Guy. These natives know the full history. They know about the cycles. They know about every previous battle between the two brothers. And they show the park crew something that changes everything. Ancient tapestries. Hanging on the walls of Lollyland, these tapestries depict the previous battles between Pops and Anti-Pops across billions of universal cycles. And in every single tapestry, there are figures standing alongside Pops. Different versions of the park crew appearing in cycle after cycle, fighting beside the Chosen One. The crew is stunned. They are not just Pop's friends. They are part of the pattern, part of the design. In every version of the universe, they have been drawn to Pops and have fought for him. And in every version, the fight has ended the same way, a stalemate, a reset, and then it all starts over. This is where Mordecai does something that nobody in billions of years of history has ever done before. He comes up with a plan. If every previous battle ended in a draw because it was always a straight fight between Pops and Anti-Pops, then they need to change the conditions. They need to set traps. They need to give Pops an advantage that he has never had in any previous cycle. It is a simple idea, but it is something new. And in a cycle that has been repeating the same way for eternity, something new is revolutionary. Pops reluctantly agrees to the plan. He does not like it. He still does not want to fight at all, but he trusts his friends. And he knows that the alternative is another reset, where everyone loses their memories and lives the same lives all over again without ever knowing. Anti-Pops arrives on Lollyland with his bounty hunters. The show adds a perfectly absurd detail here. After most of Anti-Pop's ship was destroyed during earlier conflicts, he and his bounty hunters arrive on Lollyland in something that looks like an Uber taxi. Even in the final battle for the fate of existence, regular show finds room for comedy. Pops tries one last time to avoid the fight. He approaches Anti-Pops and tells him that they are brothers. He asks him not to fight. He offers peace, but Anti-Pops refuses. He attacks Pops and the battle begins. The traps are sprung. The park crew hits Anti-Pops with everything they have, including an actual train. But Anti-Pops walks through all of it without a scratch. He even comments that the traps tickled. Nothing works. Anti-Pops is simply too powerful. The plan has failed. Pops steps forward and makes a deal with Anti-Pops. Whoever lands the first blow gets to decide the fate of the universe. It is a desperate move, but Pops has no other option. The two brothers face off, and Pops manages to land the first hit. He actually injures Anti-Pops. For a moment, it seems like the good guys have won. But Anti-Pops breaks the agreement. He does not honor the deal. He continues fighting, and things get worse fast. A character named Streaming, who had been an enemy of the Disc Masters throughout the series, suddenly arrives with his army of Streambox bot minions and sides with Anti-Pops. The odds are now overwhelmingly stacked against Pops and the park crew. This is when the finale delivers its most breathtaking moment. Just when all seems lost, help arrives. And not just a little help. Beloved characters from across all 8 seasons of regular show up to join the fight. Characters that the audience had not seen in years come back for this one moment. It is a scene that fans have compared to the Portals moment in Avengers Endgame. Except regular show did it a full year before that movie came out. Every ally the park crew has ever made across the entire series arrives to stand with them against Anti-Pops and his forces. And together, all of these characters combine their strength to form a giant robot that helps Pops in his fight. It is the most over-the-top, most ridiculous, most perfectly regular show thing imaginable. But even with all this help, the battle still comes down to the two brothers. Anti-Pops grows to an enormous size, becoming larger than a solar system. Pops transforms into a giant form of his own after Muscleman is erased by Anti-Pops' power. In his final moments before being erased, Muscleman makes one last "my mom" joke, and High Five Ghost gives him one final high five. It is heartbreaking and hilarious at the same time, which is exactly what regular show has always been. The fight between the giant forms of Pops and Anti-Pops tears reality apart. The characters are thrown through different dimensions. Pops flies through the show's own title card. Rigby becomes a post-it note test animation. Mordecai ends up in a storyboard panel. The fabric of the show itself is literally coming undone. And then, as it always has in every previous cycle, the two brothers clash, and the universe resets. The third part of the finale begins exactly like the very first episode of regular show. It is called The Power, just like episode 1. The scene is identical. Mordecai and Rigby are in their bedroom, there is a hole in the wall, and everything seems to be starting over from the beginning. For a moment, it looks like the cycle has won again. Another reset, another beginning, another loop. But then Rigby stops. Something feels wrong. He looks around and says he feels like they have done this before. The memories from the previous universe have not completely faded this time, because before the reset, the park crew had recorded all of their adventures onto a set of Blu-ray discs. These recordings survived the reset and allowed Mordecai and Rigby to remember their previous lives. They remember everything. The park, their friends, Pops, the battle, all of it. Mordecai and Rigby find the magical keyboard from the very first episode, The Power. The same keyboard that started everything back in Season 1, and they use it to travel back through time and space to the exact moment when Pops and Anti-Pops are fighting. They arrive just in time, bringing the show full circle in the most beautiful way possible. The first object that ever appeared on regular show becomes the instrument of its salvation. Pop sees his friends and remembers something. Earlier in the season, a character called the Seer had told him that sometimes doing something different makes all the difference. Pops also remembers that during their encounter, Anti-Pops had specifically said he did not need a hug. And in that moment, Pops understands what he has to do. In every previous cycle, Pops fought. That is all he ever did. He met force with force, power with power, and every time, the clash resulted in a reset. Fighting is what the cycle expects. Fighting is what keeps the loop going. So Pops does the one thing that has never been done in billions of years of universal history. He hugs Anti-Pops. Pops wraps his arms around his brother and holds him. Anti-Pops, who has known nothing but rage and destruction for all of eternity, is caught completely off guard. For a brief moment, just a few seconds, something in Anti-Pops changes. He returns to his normal size. He looks at his brother, and for the first time, he does not see an enemy. He sees family. He accepts the hug. But Pops knows this is not enough to break the cycle permanently. Their powers are equal and opposite. As long as both of them exist, the cycle will continue. The only way to end it forever is for both of them to die by something other than each other's direct power. So while holding Anti-Pops in the hug, Pops flies them both toward the sun. Mordecai and Rigby watch from below, screaming for Pops to stop, but Pops looks down at them, completely at peace, and tells them it is okay. He tells them that even though the circumstances are terrible, this is for the greater good. He wishes the best for them and for all of their friends. And then he turns back toward the sun. As they hurtle toward the star, Anti-Pops looks at Pops one final time, and he smiles. For the first and only time in his existence, Anti-Pops smiles at his brother. They die together, consumed by the sun, and the cycle is broken forever. The epilogue jumps forward through the next 25 years of the characters' lives. Mordecai leaves the park and pursues a career in art. He eventually meets a Batwoman named Steph at an art show, and they get married and have children together. Rigby marries Eileen, and they have 2 daughters. Muscleman and Starla stay together and raise 6 children, who all inherit Muscleman's personality. High Five Ghost and Celia move to Prague, become successful DJs, and have a son. Benson takes over as the official owner of the park and marries a woman named Pam. Skip stays at the park, content with his immortal life, and picks up a side job as a mechanic. A statue of Pops is built in the center of the park, so that no one will ever forget who saved the universe. 25 years later, the park crew holds a reunion. An older Mordecai and Rigby, now 54 years old, sit together and reminisce. Mordecai says quietly that he wishes Pops could have been there to see how beautiful everyone's lives turned out. They walk into the shed and play some old arcade games, laughing about how immature they used to be and saying their old catchphrases one more time. And then the show cuts to one final scene. A different place, somewhere beyond, somewhere that looks like heaven. And sitting there, watching everything on a VHS tape, is Pops. The tape is labeled Regular Show. Pops has been watching his friends this whole time. He has seen every moment, every adventure, every laugh, every tear, every beautiful life that was only possible because of what he did. He ejects the tape, smiles that same warm, gentle smile that defined him for 8 seasons, and says 2 words, "Jolly good show." And that is the entire story of Regular Show, from a magical keyboard to the end of the universe. From two slackers who could not set up chairs to a group of friends who saved all of existence. From a simple cartoon about a park to one of the greatest animated series ever made. 244 episodes, 8 seasons, 7 years, one incredible journey. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. I have another deep dive coming soon that you will not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.